She opened a bakery, but he already ruled that street. The result? A sugar war and a craving to take a bite. If you like romance with sharp edges and a crooked smile, stay here with me. The day was still only a cold breath clinging to the windows when Caleb Dempsey unlocked the door of the bakery that had carried the family surname since before he was born, Dempsey Bakery. It represented 3 generations of bread and dough secrets, following what his grandfather always said about not fearing the heat, but rather the emptiness that remains when the fire goes out. Caleb repeated this mentally as the first beams of light entered the kitchen. The shelves remained empty, but the air already carried that scent of yeast waking up, a warm perfume that enveloped everything except the owner. He preferred to believe that he belonged to no one but the oven, that ancient giant that swallowed his early mornings and returned bread. Bread meant everything. It was the reason people returned, and the smile of children with faces dirty from crumbs. It was the inheritance his grandfather left, coming accompanied by settled debts and secrets that he never shared with anyone. In town, Caleb was known as the baker of few words, the man who used nods instead of phrases. Anyone who looked closely would notice the care in cleaning the counter before opening, sweeping every crumb as if he were organizing his own mind, recording every batch in an old notebook alongside memories that no one would have access to. The phone rang and he took a deep breath before answering, imagining that whoever was calling at that hour only wanted credit or gossip. To him, gossip was like damp flour. It ruined the whole recipe. "Dempsey Bakery?" he answered. "Caleb, it is Mrs. Pearl. Are the muffins out yet?" He looked at the oven, calculating the time that remained. "Not yet, Mrs. Pearl." "Well, I am going to stop by anyway. I like to see the movement," she said between laughs. "I heard there is going to be a new neighbor on the street. Do you know about it yet?"
Caleb preferred silence, but the pause betrayed that he knew what she was talking about. "I heard it is a young woman. They say she is very beautiful. She is going to open a sweet shop in Mr. Ernesto's old spot. Poor thing, she has no idea what awaits her." "Why do you say that?" Caleb questioned, his voice dry. "Because you do not like sharing space, my son, and this street has always been yours alone." He ended the call before she could stretch the subject, rubbing his face with flour-stained hands. As much as he tried to ignore it, the rumors gained strength. They said the neighboring spot, closed for years, now had a new owner, a woman from out of town, full of inventions, colorful sweets, and modern cupcakes. He adjusted his shirt sleeve, feeling the heat of the oven, and grumbled to himself, "I just want to see if she has the willpower to wake up along with the bread." Meanwhile, an old key creaked in a jammed lock. Julie Bennett pushed open the door of the place her uncle had left, a property that looked more like a warehouse of dust and accumulated bills. She entered carrying only a backpack and wearing worn jeans, with her hair tied up haphazardly. On her lap, she held a notebook where she wrote everything, from the menu to what she would post on the internet. At the bottom of the first page, there was a question she always wrote: "Failing costs too much." Julie talked to herself, driven by the will of someone who needed to learn to manage early on. She walked across the creaking wooden floor, projecting where each display case would go and imagining the smell of sugar dominating the place. She stopped before the dirty window, cleaned a piece of the glass with her sweatshirt, and observed the street. On the opposite sidewalk, the Dempsey Bakery sign stood out, appearing to warn that it already owned the territory. Julie narrowed her eyes, reading the sign. Dempsey sounds like the name of a big beast, the kind that makes noise but does not scare anyone. She gave a corner smile, walking through the empty hall. She tried to imagine the grumpy baker everyone commented on, the man who treated the bakery like a burden and never smiled at anyone. They said his coffee was bitter and his temperament even worse. "Well then, Caleb Dempsey," she said softly, staring at the neighboring facade. "Get ready. I am going to make this street much sweeter, even if I have to spread sugar on your sidewalk." The cell phone rang with messages from her mother, asking if she did not want to come back home or try a more stable job, saying that confectionery was too heavy a job for her. Julie started typing that a woman does whatever she wants, from accounting to cake, but gave up on the confrontation. She deleted the text and wrote something simpler. "Mom, trust me, just this once." She put the device away, feeling the smell of a closed place mixed with the expectation of something new. Alone in that dusty hall, Julie felt a mixture of butterflies in her stomach and determination. If it were easy, it would not be her style. In the bakery, Caleb aligned the breads on the counter, organizing muffins, baguettes, and croissants that he pretended not to like, but insisted on preparing. My grandfather said French customers were demanding. Caleb never saw a Frenchman step into those parts, but he maintained the tradition of the recipe. The helper, a 19-year-old boy named Dominic, entered carrying a sack of flour and dropped the question, "Boss, is it true there is going to be a new sweet shop here on the street?" Caleb did not even raise his eyes. "Yes." "And you are not worried?" the boy insisted. "Why would I be?" the baker countered. Dominic shrugged, dropping the bag on the floor. "I don't know, competition, divided customers, those things." Caleb finally looked at him with an expression as firm as the wood of the counter. "Dominic, if a customer of mine trades bread for a colorful little sweet, then they were never a real customer." The boy laughed, but Caleb remained serious as he arranged the display case. His thoughts drifted to the neighbor. He imagined the woman painting the walls, speaking loudly, and receiving curious people who would ask if she intended to compete with Dempsey. He was already formulating the answer in silence for her. Yes, and she is going to fail miserably. But a part of him, stubborn as dough that goes wrong, felt curiosity. He wanted to know who the crazy woman was who arrived breaking protocols, if she had the grit to handle the pressure, or if she would give up in the first week. Without noticing, Caleb molded small breads in the shape of a heart, a habit from when he was a boy and made treats for his mother, something he had not repeated in years. But there they were, 2 small loaves, almost smiling at him on the tray. Dominic stopped, observed, and furrowed his brow. "Boss, are you making hearts?" Caleb muttered a low curse, crushed the dough, and transformed it into common bread again. "I am not." "You were indeed, I saw it," the boy teased. "Go clean the counter, Dominic." "But I already cleaned it." "Then clean it again." Caleb ended the subject. No kindness for the stranger. Julie, for her part, wrote phrases on the peeling wall. "Sweeter than gossip, stronger than weak coffee." She ran her finger through the dust and felt the anxiety vibrate, as if the place were a living organism waiting for her hands to take shape. The phone rang. It was Avery, her best friend. "So, have you given up on the madness yet?" Julie let out a laugh. "Not yet." "But has it crossed your mind?" "All the time," Julie admitted.
Avery sighed on the other side of the line. "Friend, do you realize that opening a business right next to an old bakery is asking for trouble?" "I know, and it will be interesting," Julie responded. "Interesting or a disaster?" the friend questioned. Julie sat on the floor, leaning her head against the cold wall. "Avery, if I back down now, I will spend my life wondering what would have happened. I prefer to try and fail than to die in doubt." There was a brief silence, and Avery's voice returned calmer. "All right, but if you need help dealing with the grumpy baker, just call." Julie gave a loud laugh, hung up, and went back to her scribbles. When she finally stopped to rest on a crate, her chest tightened between fear and the will to win. She remembered her grandmother, who said that a good recipe requires patience. Julie did not have time to spare, but she faced life with an appetite. Without realizing it, she breathed the same air as Caleb, a mixture of yeast, rivalry, and a story that was beginning to cook on a slow fire in that town that does not usually make things easy for those who arrive. The first problem arose with a wire, a frayed cable hanging from the ceiling of the future shop. Julie stared at the wiring balanced on a shaky chair, with the main power switch off and the phone in one hand, while the other held a roll of electrical tape, as if that would solve everything by magic. Sure, Julie, open a sweet shop from scratch, alone, in an old building that creaks more than your patience in the early morning. Great idea, she grumbled, resting her forehead on her raised arm. The chair groaned under her feet, and Julie froze in place. No, not now. Hold on just a little bit more, just until I can... The furniture complained again, louder this time. Please, I promise I will never climb on you with dirty sneakers again, she whispered. She took a deep breath and ended up looking through the crack in the window. That Dempsey fellow was there. He wore his shirt sleeves rolled up to his forearms, with his hair messy, in that way that looks careless but works very well. He had the stature of someone who makes silence weigh on the environment. It was a presence that annoyed and attracted at the same time. Julie bit the corner of her tongue, too stubborn to admit any curiosity, and observed the man for another second. He cleaned the counter in a methodical way, almost rehearsed, as if every movement had a reason to be. He stopped, stared at the street, and went back to work. Seriously, does this guy clean the same wood 3 times? She murmured to herself. Either it is a cleaning obsession or a lack of things to do. She climbed down from the chair before it decided to give way, fixed the strands escaping from her bun, wiped the dust off her jeans, and decided that if she had to face the neighbor, it should be now. She walked decisively to the bakery and entered, slapping her palm on the counter, calling for attention. Caleb was alone, handing change to an elderly woman who would not stop smiling at him. "Do you need anything else, Mrs. Pearl?" "I need you to find a sensible girl to put up with you, my son." Caleb let out a heavy sigh, although the corner of his mouth had almost betrayed a smile. "You know that I do not have time for those foolish things." "Time? What you have is fear," the old woman shot back. Before he could retort, Pearl turned her face and winked at Julie, who watched the scene leaning on the counter with a challenging smile. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Pearl, I am too expensive to marry," Julie fired off before Caleb even opened his mouth. The lady gave a loud laugh. "I liked you, girl. Caleb, this one is one of the good ones. She has a sharp tongue. She is the rival you needed." Caleb finally faced Julie, truly looking at the woman in front of him. Pearl took the bag, adjusted her purse on her shoulder, and left grumbling with satisfaction. "I'm even going to buy popcorn. This street is going to get lively," she said, leaving behind the smell of warm bread and a tension that no one there tried to hide. The baker measured Julie from head to toe, not with ulterior motives, but as someone evaluating a problem arriving, except Julie had a magnetism that made any logic difficult. Behind the casual look, there was an expression of someone who did not accept orders, and he detested the fact that he had noticed that.
"Are you the baker everyone is talking about?" he asked in a dry tone, but feeling his chest react in a strange way. "Depends." She leaned her elbow on the counter, appearing like the owner of the place. "If this is an interrogation, I'm just the crazy woman who is going to go bankrupt soon. If it is an invitation for coffee, I'm the future owner of the street." Caleb did not smile, but his gaze became less rigid. "I do not serve coffee to those who come to compete with me." "Lucky for me, because your coffee must be horrible," she teased. He arched an eyebrow. "And have you happened to taste it yet?" "I do not need to. I know the profile." "What profile?" "Too strong to disguise the lack of sweetness," Julie answered without blinking. Caleb paused for a moment, while Dominic, who was cleaning the counter in the background, let out a little laugh. "Dominic, go check the stock now," Caleb ordered, without taking his eyes off his neighbor.
The boy disappeared in a second. Julie continued the conversation, lightly poking a bag of flour that was nearby. "I need a technical favor. There's a loose wire right where I am going to place my display case. If a customer touches that, they turn into toast before paying for the sweet. Do you understand wiring, Baker?" He took a deep breath and looked at the oven, appearing to ponder if it was worth helping the woman who had just insulted his coffee. "Call an electrician," he said with a rasping voice. "I already called, but he can only see me 2 weeks from now. Either you help me now, or I spread my entire production of cupcakes on your sidewalk. They are the best you have ever seen, buttery and with real filling. Imagine the chaos of your customers adoring me and ignoring you," Julie countered, with that sweet voice that seemed to hide a poison. Caleb grit his teeth, and she continued without giving any quarter. "I will even put up a sign saying it's a gift from Bennett's Bakery. Think of the advertisement." He gripped the edge of the counter, feeling his blood rise. "Is that a threat?" "It's a chance for you to be a decent neighbor." "And if I don't want to?" he challenged. Julie shrugged, starting to walk away. "Then you will have to explain to everyone why your entrance is full of incredible sweets every single day." Caleb detested being pressured, but what bothered him most was the way that woman spoke. She was a mixture of strength and sweetness that he could not decipher. She seemed like a dough that went wrong and he did not know how to fix. He wiped his hands on an old cloth, letting out a heavy sigh. "Do not blame me if we end up being electrocuted." "I promise not to scream," Julie answered with her back turned, shaking the key to the commercial spot with an air of victory. "But if I die, you will have to explain yourself to the police. I will say that you were too stubborn and gave me no choice." She stopped at the door, turning her face just enough so that he could see her smile. "And you think anyone will believe that?" Caleb preferred silence. He simply grabbed his toolbox and went out after her. He entered the neighboring hall without asking permission, feeling a scent different from everything he knew. It was a mixture of dust with a feminine perfume that confused the senses of a man accustomed only to the odor of yeast. Julie kept watching while he analyzed the place, noticing how he furrowed his brow at the peeling walls. "This place needs an urgent renovation," he commented. "Thank you for the warning. I thought it was ready for a magazine cover," she said ironically.
He ignored the jab and pointed to the hanging wire. "It needs a ladder or a little bit of sense." "A ladder I do not have, and the sense I lost a long time ago," she answered, standing with her hands on her waist, which ended up leaving a small strip of skin exposed. Caleb swallowed hard, diverting his gaze to the floor as if there were something fascinating there, but the trail of her perfume rose up his neck, creating a dangerous tension. "Does this chair hold the weight?" he asked, testing the seat with the tip of his foot. "It worked for me, but I am a little heavier than you." Julie crossed her arms, staring at him. "Are you saying that I am light?" "I'm saying that old wood does not usually handle stubbornness well," he retorted. She let out a short laugh. "Funny guy. Get up there before I change my mind and look for a real professional." Caleb climbed onto the chair, trying to maintain his balance while the furniture creaked. Julie took a step forward, acting on instinct. "Hold it here at the bottom," he commanded. She obeyed, holding firmly onto the backrest, but a false move left her millimeters away. Her hip brushed against his leg, a quick touch that made Caleb's spine tingle. "Is it steady up there?" she asked, with her voice now lower and closer. He did not answer, concentrated on wrapping the electrical tape around the wire while trying to control his breathing. Her presence there was like a magnet that he could not ignore. "Baker, if you fall, I will not be able to catch you," she warned in a playful tone. "If I go to the floor, I'm taking you with me." "Typical. The ship sinks and you want to take the lifeboat with you?" He almost let a smile escape. His shirt rose up a little when he stretched his arm, revealing the effort of his muscles. Julie noticed that it was not a gym body, but that of someone who worked hard every day carrying bags of flour.
Strong baker, who would have thought, she teased. Impudent confectioner. I did not imagine it either, he retorted, finishing the service with agile fingers. She smiled, a small gesture that seemed like an invitation for the clash to continue. Do you treat all your competitors with all this charm? You are not a competitor. And what am I then? He stepped down from the chair carefully, stopping right in front of her, leaving a minimal distance between them. You are a problem. Julie tilted her head. Her eyes were shining. Funny, I was going to say the same thing about you. The two remained there, face to face, in a heavy silence where they could hear each other's breathing. Thank you, she said at last, maintaining her defiant tone. Do I owe you anything? Not yet, but now I know exactly where to find you. I live right there, right next door, she responded, biting her tongue and delivering the final blow. Do not forget to bake some courage tomorrow, because bread alone does not make the shop sell. Caleb tried to formulate a response, but the words vanished. For the first time in a long time, someone had left him completely speechless. He simply gathered his tools. If you need anything else, call a real professional, he warned, standing at the door with his hand on the knob. Caleb did not turn around, but he felt her gaze burning his back as Julie replied with that tone he was already beginning to hate. You do not, before leaving and letting the sound of the doorbell echo in the void. Julie stood there, alone, in the middle of the dust, and leaned against the wall, feeling the cold plaster against her back. She closed her eyes for an instant, feeling her heart beating too fast, and her hands still firm on the chair, as if the furniture were the only thing preventing her from floating away. A corner smile appeared, while she whispered to the empty walls, "It's going to be fun playing with fire right next to the oven."
Julie woke up even before the alarm gave its first signal. It was not her usual habit, but the desire to provoke her neighbor kept her wired. What Caleb had said the day before, the way he solved the wire problem as if it were nothing, but left with her scent clinging to his clothes, all of that served as fuel for the war she intended to start. She stretched on the narrow bed, staring at the cracks in the ceiling of the small room she rented at the back of the shop, and smiled, remembering his face when he heard that a heart alone does not fill a shelf, the way he froze, not knowing what to say. "Point for me," she murmured, jumping out of bed. She took a quick shower, put on a pair of worn jeans, and tied her hair in that usual bun, which already woke up messy. She grabbed her grandmother's recipe book with yellowed pages and sugar marks that told stories of decades, and ran her finger over the shaky handwriting that said the secret of the cookie was in the salt. She went down the stairs that creaked with every step, opened the door of the future sweet shop, and took a deep breath of the smell of old wood mixed with the promise of a sweet victory. Before picking up the brush, she peeked at the street and saw that he was already there. Dempsey was sweeping the sidewalk as if he were the owner of every inch of it, with the wrinkled shirt of someone who did not have a very peaceful night of sleep. Julie stood there in the doorway, observing his methodical way. 3 strokes forward, 2 to the side, a repeated ritual as if the street's dirt were a direct defense. Obsessive, she thought, but she could not help the laugh. She picked up the can of light pink paint, the one her mother would find too flashy, and crossed the street slowly. She raised her voice just enough to be heard without needing to get too close. "Hey, Baker! Are you sweeping the street or trying to scare away the competition?" Caleb raised his face without haste, with a corner smile that seemed a mixture of bad mood and satisfaction at her boldness. "If I could scare away the competition, I would not waste time with the broom. I would just lock the door and that's it." She returned the smile, keeping her sharp tone. "Too bad locking the door doesn't hold back a curious customer." He stopped his work, resting the broom handle in his hands. "And do you think curiosity pays the bills?" "I do, if what's in the window is worth it," she retorted. "A pretty window doesn't make the bread rise," Caleb returned. Julie tilted her head, pretending she was thinking about the matter.
It is true, but it makes people stop, and whoever stops ends up coming in, and if they come in, then my talent does the rest. Caleb made a sound through his nose, almost letting a laugh escape. Talent? You just got here and you're already full of yourself. I'm not full of myself. I know what I'm doing, she said, leaning down to pick up the paint can, but before starting the painting, are you going to want a cupcake when I open? It helps take away this bitterness. He leaned the broom against the wall and crossed his arms, showing his forearms stained with flour. A cupcake is a dessert for those who are afraid to face a real cake. She arched her eyebrow, and real cake is an excuse for those who don't have the competence to make a frosting. Frosting is just decoration. What counts is what's inside, he stated. Funny, I thought you would say that what counts is the family recipe, Julie countered. That too. And I bet your grandmother did not skip the frosting, she teased. Caleb opened his mouth to retort, but stopped halfway, because his grandmother really did make a lemon frosting that was famous in the region. Julie noticed the hesitation and smiled victoriously. See, the frosting makes a difference, Dempsey, and when mine is ready, you're going to have to admit it. The two stared at each other for a time longer than usual, with his breathing weighing in the silence. Anyone watching from the outside would think it was a flirtation, but it was a pure clash where every phrase was a test for the other's ego. A neighbor passed by with a shopping cart and stopped between the two, observing the scene. Are you two going to get married or fight? Because the way you look at each other, it seems like both are on the table. Julie ended up choking on the direct question, and Caleb turned his back quickly, pretending to focus on the cleaning. Good morning, Mrs. Dakota. The lady laughed, continuing on her way. Nothing good about the morning, Caleb. You look like someone who spent the night wide awake thinking about a fight or something better. She winked at Julie, who was trying to hide her laughter. Welcome to the neighborhood, dear, but I'm already warning you to prepare your spirit, because this fellow there does not accept losing. She left humming, leaving the two behind. Julie began to paint the window while she saw Caleb enter the bakery, making the doorbell ring loudly. On the other side of the glass, he saw her writing slowly, taking care with each letter of the phrase. Sugar in the right measure, poison too. He huffed, rubbing his face to ward off the fatigue. Subtle, he murmured to his own oven as he organized the trays. Dominic appeared carrying a load of croissants. Boss, the girl over there is quite beautiful. Caleb stared at the boy with a look that would make anyone back away. Dominic. I'm serious, I'm just commenting, the young man insisted. Comment less and work more. But it's the truth, and she seems to be smart too. I saw the way she poked at you earlier, Dominic continued, without noticing the danger. Caleb pointed to the opening of the oven. Go check the temperature before I decide to use you as firewood. The boy left laughing, and while the scent of cinnamon rolls began to dominate the air, Caleb took the little order book and wrote a silly reminder about making his neighbor's life difficult. It was just a thought, of course, but the idea of having someone to butt heads with warmed a rivalry he didn't even know he missed.
Julie Bennett brought a new discomfort, a kind of itch that he could not decide if he wanted to ignore or let bother him until it truly hurt. As the morning progressed and the sun began to punish the sidewalk, Julie decided to make an unannounced visit to the bakery. She was carrying a tin of cookies, not to give as a gift, but to use as an excuse to scout the terrain. Before entering, she took a deep breath, fixed the loose strands of her hair, and wiped a trail of paint from her arm. The doorbell rang, and Caleb had his back turned, leaning over the counter, taking out steaming loaves of bread. His shirt clung to his skin because of the kitchen heat, transforming the place into a warm and stuffy environment. She cleared her throat just to see the man turn around, with that face of someone who measures every letter before speaking. "Is this a bakery or a sauna?" she teased, fanning her face with her hand. "I almost melted before seeing the bread." Caleb dropped the tray, wiped his hands on the dish towel, and stared at her like someone dealing with an unwanted guest. "The door is open. Nobody forced you to come in." "True, but curiosity spoke louder." "Be careful, as curiosity usually brings trouble," he countered.
Julie placed the tin on the counter and smiled. Lucky for me, I know how to handle myself quite well. He ignored the remark, took one of the loaves, split it in half, and placed it in front of her. Want to take it to compare with your dough? They say too much sugar ruins anyone's palate. Julie took the piece, smelled the aroma, and took a bite. She chewed slowly, looking at the ceiling as if she were performing a deep technical analysis. She swallowed and wiped the corner of her mouth with her hand. "It is not bad." "It is not bad?" Caleb repeated, feeling his tone of voice rise a bit. "Yeah, it is good, but it's not exactly incredible." "And what is missing for it to be incredible, in your opinion?" he challenged. Julie approached the counter, getting so close that the heat of the oven felt cold compared to the tension that rose between the two. "It lacks soul. This bread is technically perfect, but it has no story. It feels like you did everything on autopilot." Caleb blinked, trying to process the criticism, since no one had ever had the courage to talk about his work that way. "No story?" "Yeah, you know, when you bite into something and remember a good place, your childhood or a hug. Well, I did not feel any of that," she shrugged, as if she had not just kicked his pride. "Funny, maybe your stock of bitterness is getting in the way of the recipe." She rested her elbows on the wood, and Caleb smelled her scent again. It was something light, yet striking. "Do you need something, Bennett?" "I do." Her gaze sparkled with a side smile. "I need customers, and yours seem to be liking what they saw outside." She pointed to the newly painted window through the glass, where a group of elderly ladies stopped to take photos and point at the new shop. Caleb held back the urge to laugh. "You can paint whatever you want. Those who want real bread come here. Those who want bread come here, but those who seek a bit of happiness, well, that is with me." "Happiness?" He almost let out a laugh. "Now you sell happiness in a jar?" "I sell sugar, but everyone knows that a sweet is the happiness we need sometimes." Caleb was going to answer, but Dominic appeared from the back with the look of someone who heard the entire conversation. "Boss, she's right. Dominic, go back to the stockroom now." "But I just—" "Now," he cut him off, and the boy vanished again. Julie pushed the tin of cookies toward him. "Try it. You'll see that my dough wins by a mile." Caleb took the cookie, analyzed it as if it were something dangerous, and took a dry bite, chewing slowly while keeping his gaze fixed on her. He swallowed and gave the verdict with the straightest face in the world. It lacked flavor. "That's a lie." "It is not a lie." Julie leaned over the counter, getting inches away from him. "Are you a liar, or were you born with a ruined palate?" "Neither. I'm just sincere," he replied, maintaining his firm posture. "Sincere is the person who admits when they're wrong," she countered with a sharp gaze. Caleb held the cookie, raising it as if making a toast. "Then when you admit that my bread is incredible, I'll admit that your sweet is decent." Julie bit her lower lip, trying to hold back a laugh. "The flavor is in your answer. It's quite bitter, actually," she whispered before turning her back and walking toward the exit. The doorbell sang as she passed, but the sound seemed to echo longer than usual, or perhaps it was just Caleb's head, caught in a silence that felt like a promise that the next round would not be long. He stood there, cookie in hand, looked down and took another bite. It was good. It was very good, and that irritated him deeply. Dominic reappeared with a grin from ear to ear. "Boss, you're still holding the neighbor's cookie." "So what?" Caleb growled. "And you said it lacked flavor." "It did, but you're still eating it," the boy teased. Caleb tossed the rest into his mouth, chewing with some haste. "I'm testing it to be sure of what I'm talking about."
Dominic crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Uh-huh, sure. Tell me another one." "Go to work, Dominic." "I am going, but just one thing, boss." He stopped before leaving. "She's very good at it." "At what?" Caleb asked. "At getting under your skin." Caleb preferred not to answer because the boy was right, and he detested it when the helper was right about anything. At the end of that afternoon, Caleb passed by the front of the sweet shop. Not that he needed that path, but he felt an impulse to observe the movement. He saw the door just ajar and Julie kneeling, organizing buckets of frosting and testing pastry tips. She was humming a song he did not recognize, but which sounded far too cheerful for someone who was cleaning. He stopped and watched for a second. Her back was toward him, with her hair falling from the bun and a strand sticking to the nape of her neck. There was flour on her shoulder and a mark of something sweet on her elbow, and even so, she looked as if she had been made for that setting. Caleb shook his head, irritated with his own thoughts, and kept walking. But as he passed, he accidentally on purpose dropped a small bag of flour right at her entrance. The powder spread, creating a white cloud that covered the doorstep and part of the door. Julie raised her face, the tip of her nose sprinkled with white. She blinked, processing the scene, and slowly a dangerous and amused smile emerged on her face. "Are you marking territory, Dempsey?" she asked, placing her hand on her hip and staring at the baker. He shrugged, maintaining that face of someone who had nothing to do with the matter. "Sorry, the bag ended up ripping." "It ripped?" She stood up without haste, wiping her dirty hands on her apron. "Funny, I have the impression that you gave it a little help to make that happen." "Old bag, the stitching was weak," he justified. "Sure, and I'm the Queen of England," Julie countered. She walked toward him, stepping over the white pile and stopping right in front of him. There was powder on her nose, her forehead, and in the strands of her hair, but her gaze was pure defiance. "Next time, just pour it directly into my stock. That way we save on shipping." Caleb felt the corner of his mouth twitch, but he held back the laugh. "There will not be a next time." "Liar." "I am not." Julie ran her hand across her forehead, leaving a trail of white powder. "Do you know what I think, Dempsey?" "I do not, and I am not interested in knowing." "I think you are dying of curiosity to see what my shop is going to be like, and deep down, you're afraid," she fired off. "Afraid?" He let out a dry laugh. "Afraid of what exactly?" "Of ending up liking it." The silence weighed for a few seconds. Caleb took a step back, feeling like he needed space. "I am not going to like anything." "Yes, you will, and what's going to hurt will be your pride," she stated with confidence. He turned his back, already stepping down to the sidewalk, but before disappearing around the corner, he decided to provoke her one last time. "Watch out for that loose flour, Bennett. It tends to stain clean glass." Julie remained there, standing in the middle of that white cloud, smiling to nothing. "It can stain. I will clean it without a problem." That night, she swept up every grain, bagged the mess, and threw it away. But she decided to save a little bit in a small glass jar. She wrote on the lid that it was the first attack and that her neighbor was childish. She left the jar on the shelf right next to her grandmother's recipes. Across the street, Caleb was finishing his shift, locking the doors and checking the padlock twice. Before leaving, he looked at the neighboring sweet shop and saw that the light was still on. He could see her shadow moving inside, organizing things and preparing the ground. He exhaled forcefully. "She will not last 3 months here," he said to himself. But as he started to walk, he felt that the taste of her sweet was still in his memory, and he hated the fact that the helper was right after all. There was no lack of flavor in that recipe. Thus, between provocations, scattered flour, and bread that almost burned due to a lack of attention, the two realized that the street was becoming too small for so much bickering. The dispute was only at the beginning, and the neighborhood was already noticing the atmosphere. Mrs. Pearl, sitting on the park bench with the newspaper on her lap, watched the movement from afar. When she saw Caleb pass, she did not miss the chance and shouted, "Good evening to the most stubborn baker in town." He said nothing, only quickened his pace. The old woman laughed to herself, shaking her head. Those two are still going to give people plenty to talk about before they admit that one cannot live without the other's fighting.
The city was waking up at a slow pace, but Caleb was not. For him, the dawn was much more reliable than any person. It was the time of silence, of the dough rising and the oven creaking, everything in its place and without any surprise. Or at least it was that way until Julie opened the door of the neighboring spot. Sitting on an old bench, with his apron still stained with cinnamon, he stared at the deserted street while the morning bagels rested on the shelf, trying to pretend he did not hear the noise. But it was impossible to ignore the drill, the hammer, and that muffled laughter from Julie scolding the painter who never arrived on time. "If you are late again tomorrow, I will paint this wall myself." Her voice crossed the street, firm and full of mockery. The man would mutter some excuse, and she would laugh, a laugh that seemed light but that stuck in the head of whoever heard it as if it were a song of torture. Even worse was the smell that escaped when she decided to test recipes, something far too sweet and provocative. Excessive, he thought with a hint of anger and another of hunger. Dominic entered through the back door, carrying crates of eggs. "Boss, the smell of chocolate is coming straight from her shop." "I know," Caleb answered dryly. "It's good, don't you think?" Caleb turned his face slowly, with a closed expression. "Dominic." "I'm just commenting, boss." "Comment about the stock, then. Go there and tell me how much flour we still have," the baker ordered. The boy left, but not before muttering quietly that he bet the boss had already gone to check the smell up close. Caleb heard it, but preferred the silence, feeling gnawed by an annoyance he could not explain. He missed the peace from before, and not having to look to the side and come face to face with that crooked sign hanging on the facade. Soon, Bennett's Bakery. It wasn't even a real shop yet, but it already messed up his routine. What irritated Caleb the most was not the renovation or the perfume of sweets. It was Julie herself. The way she spoke loudly, the mocking smile, and the habit of crossing the street just to poke at him. The worst of all was how that touched a corner of him that should stay well guarded. It was nothing sentimental, he thought. It was just pure rivalry and an immense desire to win the dispute. But when she leaned against his counter with that determined gait and smiled sideways, something inside him heated up, and he hated feeling that with all his strength. Meanwhile, Julie cleaned the flour that Caleb had left on her sidewalk. "Uncle, you really could have left this place more organized," she murmured, talking to herself as she had done since she arrived. She swept everything and stopped in front of the cracked mirror that still remained on the wall, seeing the flour in her hair, the paint on her face, and a small cut on her finger from improvising so much with the tools. "You are a disaster, Julie Bennett, but at least you're alive," she said to her own reflection. The electrician did not show up. The painter vanished out of nowhere, and the display case had a crack that she tried to hide with colorful stickers. But the place was hers. Every detail was a cry of freedom that she embraced whenever fear hit. In the middle of the dust and the smell of new dough, her thoughts ended up escaping to the neighbor. She could curse and say she hated him, but ignoring Caleb Dempsey was a task she had not yet learned to accomplish. It was enough to hear the tinkling of the bell in the door next door for her body to go on alert, as if she needed to know where he was, what he said, or what he thought about her. It was something ridiculous and detestable. Julie would huff and go back to cleaning the counter, trying to convince herself that that constant provocation served only as fuel for work. It was true, in part, but there was something more there, a feeling she avoided naming so as not to lose focus. Better to continue the war than to name the beasts, she thought. Avery called in the middle of the afternoon, interrupting her thoughts. "So, have you managed to finish off the baker yet?" Julie let out a laugh, sitting on a wooden box turned over on the floor. "Not yet, but the idea goes through my head all the time." "Seriously, Julie, how are things going over there?" The confectioner looked through the window and saw the shadow of Caleb passing by the bakery window. "It's complicated. He's a difficult fellow." "Difficult how?" Avery wanted to know. "Irritating to the extreme, but in a strange way, he ends up being interesting." There was a pause on the other line of the phone before Avery blurted out, "Julie, don't do it." "Do what?" "Don't go falling in love with your greatest rival of all people." Julie almost choked on her own saliva. "Fall in love? Me? With that grumpy bear? You've gone completely mad, Avery." "I'm just warning you. I know your way, and that tone of voice doesn't fool me." "What tone of voice?" "That one of someone who pretends to hate but loves being provoked by him." Julie ended the call irritated, but the doubt kept hammering. Avery had touched on a sensitive and true point. The weeks went by, the lights of the confectionery gained color, and the furniture arrived little by little, while the boxes of packaging piled up in a corner as if they were soldiers awaiting the order to attack. Julie tested brownie recipes until late hours, scribbled ideas on napkins, and checked every cent spent on her phone. Every time she closed her eyes to rest, the image of Caleb with his arms crossed appeared in her mind, repeating that it would not last at all. She smiled to herself in the dark, feeling exhausted but full of life. It will last, Baker, and it will still leave you behind. On the opposite sidewalk, Caleb revised his methods, tested different fillings, and accepted nothing less than the best. He knew he was raising the level of his own bakery because of her, and he felt anger for admitting it. The clientele noticed the difference, commenting that the coffee seemed fresher and the muffins lighter. Mrs. Pearl entered the shop one morning, sniffing the air with suspicion. "Caleb Dempsey, did you change something around here?" He tried to dodge. "I did not change anything." "You did change. The bread has another flavor. It is much better." "It is the same recipe as always," he insisted. Pearl narrowed her gaze and leaned against the counter. "You are a terrible liar. You're competing with the neighbor and, from what I can see, you're having fun with it." Caleb turned his back, organizing shelves that were already impeccable. "I am not in a dispute with anyone." "Then explain to me the reason for having tested 3 new batches just this week." "Pure coincidence." The elderly woman laughed, taking a muffin from the basket. "Coincidence is the excuse a stubborn man uses when he's afraid to admit that the competition has gotten to him." Inside, he was seething. "It may be war, but I do not intend to give up," he muttered in silence. Between layers of frosting and the smell of warm bread, the city realized that this story went far beyond who sold more. There was a tension there that no one could ignore. The grand opening of Bennett's Bakery finally had a date set, a sunny Saturday, perfect for attracting a crowd. Julie spread posters, checked the sign, and sighed every time the wind blew harder. She chose the day strategically, knowing the street would be full. The assistant arrived early, excited about the movement. "Boss, people are already talking. Everyone wants to see the place." Julie smiled, feeling butterflies in her stomach. "That is good. If no one comes, we will have a feast just for the 2 of us." "If no one shows up, I can manage to eat everything myself," the girl joked. Caleb passed in front of the shop, pretending he was just going for a walk, which was strange since he never went out at that time. He saw the decorations, the balloons, and Julie's anxious face, feeling something that was not anger nor a desire to compete, but something that seemed, from a distance, like a sign of respect. He shook his head, trying to push the idea away. That was ridiculous, he thought. Julie heard the sound of his footsteps even before he opened his mouth. "Did you spend a fortune on that new sign?" She didn't even bother to look back, continuing to tape the glass. "Do you want to sponsor the next one, Dempsey?" She responded with a voice heavy with sarcasm. He crossed his arms and leaned against the post, his shadow covering part of her display window. "I do not put my money into a business that has a closing date." Julie let out a short laugh, still with her back to him. "What a pity. You could have your name featured on my counter. That way you would know exactly where to ask for help when your recipes become outdated." "New recipe? I carry 3 generations of history in my hands. I don't need colorful cupcakes for anything," he stated with his chest puffed out. "You don't need them, or are you afraid to find out that you like them?" she countered with a smirk. He approached just one step, getting close enough to feel the aroma of chocolate that seemed to sprout from her skin. "I am not afraid of anything that comes from you, Bennett." Julie turned slowly, still holding the roll of tape, holding his gaze like someone accepting a silent duel where the weapons were only ironies. "So what are you doing here? Is there no work at the bakery?" "There is. I'm just checking the level of the neighbor." "And what did you conclude?" she wanted to know. Caleb ran his eyes over the sign, the decorations, and the new paint, stopping finally on her face, on her hair that was always out of place, and those eyes that seemed to beg for a sharp comment. "I concluded that you close your doors in 2 months." Julie took a step forward, defiant. "Wanna bet?" "I bet." "What?" He thought fast, looking for something that would hit her. "If you go bankrupt, you will have to paint the facade of my bakery for free." "And if I succeed?" "That will not happen." "But if it does," she insisted, narrowing her eyes. He hesitated for a second before giving in. "Then you choose the prize." Julie bit her lip, formulating the perfect punishment, and extended her hand to seal the deal. "Deal. But when I win, you're going to work an entire day here with me, wearing a pink apron." Caleb shook her hand, a firm and warm touch that trapped her fingers for an extra second, making time feel strange. "I am never wearing pink." "Then it's better not to lose the bet," she replied with a victorious glow. They let go of their hands, but remained there, standing still, measuring strength with their eyes while waiting to see who would have the weakness to look away first. Mrs. Pearl passed by with her shopping cart and stopped right in the middle of the two. "Are you two going to stand there staring at each other, or are you going to kiss already?" Julie choked on the question, while Caleb turned his back quickly, feeling his face heat up to the tips of his ears. "Good morning, Mrs. Pearl." "Good morning, nothing. You two look like protagonists of a soap opera, nothing but stalling," the elderly woman commented, going her way and laughing to herself. Julie went back to work with the tape, but could not hide her amusement. Caleb still watched her for a moment before grumbling, "Get that smell of cinnamon off my sidewalk." "You get that smell of sugar out of my face," she shot back without raising her voice. "What are you going to do?" he teased. "Are you going to sweep? Are you going to complain to whom?" Caleb held back the urge to smile, his chest almost brushing against hers, in a movement that was pure provocation of war, but that to anyone passing on the street had another meaning. "I am going to win, Bennett, my way and without needing any fluff." She raised her chin, standing so close he could feel her breath. "Good luck then, Baker. We will see each other in the winner's line." Later, back at the counter, Caleb pretended to organize the products while his mind was glued to the conversation from earlier. Dominic arranged the trays and noticed that the boss was acting in a different way, with that face of someone trying to hide a persistent thought. One of the employees asked if everything was all right, and Caleb responded with a dry growl. "Better than ever." Dominic coughed, hiding his laughter. "That is your standard for happiness, right? Bordering on a collapse." Caleb frowned, irritated. "What did you say?" "Nothing, boss. I'm just agreeing with you," the boy replied quickly. Inside, the baker felt that everything was out of order, as if the arrival of his neighbor was too much yeast for the quiet life he led. Julie, meanwhile, finished tidying up the shop entrance and sat on the sidewalk with a mug of cold coffee, looking at her facade and feeling the weight of responsibility. Behind all that tough act, fear still whispered softly, asking what she would do if everything went wrong. The answer emerged in a snap, the memory of the way he stared at her, as if he doubted her every step. Julie drank the rest of the coffee, making a face at the bitter taste left in her mouth. "It's going to work, even if I have to clog this street with sweets until he cannot take it anymore." Quinn sat next to her on the sidewalk. "Boss, can I ask you something?" "You can," Julie responded, still distracted. "Do you like him?" Julie almost choked. "Dempsey? Have you gone crazy? Of course not." "Then why do you have that smile on your face every time you finish a fight with him?" the assistant insisted. "I do not smile." "Yes, you do." Julie looked at the sky, letting out a heavy sigh. "Quinn, I smile because I like to win, and bickering with him is like a workout." "A workout for what?" the girl wanted to know. "For when I actually need to win something that is worth it." Quinn shook her head, not hiding her laughter. "Sure, that's right then." On the following Saturday morning, the entire city already felt that something was about to happen. When Julie Bennett opened that door, it would not just be cakes coming out of there. What was at stake was a clash of egos, sparks, and the smell of sugar in the air, hiding a tension that no one had the courage to admit, but that everyone made a point of watching closely. Mrs. Pearl sat on her usual bench in the square on Friday night, the eve of the opening, watching the confectionery all lit up in contrast to the bakery already in the dark. Tomorrow is going to be quite a day, she murmured to herself, with a smile of someone who knows things. She was not wrong, because in a small place, everyone shares the same idea. When two people waste so much time poking at each other, it's because the interest is greater than the anger. Julie and Caleb continued in that ugly fight, as if their lives depended on who would have the last word.
Julie no longer used an alarm. She did not need one. It was enough for the sound of the iron gate of the bakery next door opening punctually at 4 in the morning for her to wake up. It was the sound of the start of the journey, the creak of the lock, the bell striking the first note, and the trail of the broom scraping the asphalt of the sidewalk. Caleb began the day cleaning what was already clean, merely to chase away his thoughts or to ensure that that piece of the street still belonged to him. On the inside, Julie closed her eyes for a second, breathed in the cold air, and whispered to the walls, "You can sweep the world, Dempsey. I am going to cover everything in frosting." She stood up, feeling her muscles complain about the meager 3 hours of sleep, descended the wooden stairs that creaked under her feet, and entered the confectionery shop that still exhaled the smell of renovation and fresh paint. On top of the counter, boxes of sweets that she had tested during the early hours of the morning served as proof of her stubbornness. Every time she lifted her head, she saw the light on in the neighboring storefront, a constant reminder that her rival did not rest. Julie turned on the second-hand oven, organized the flour, the eggs, and the butter, trying to maintain focus while her mind insisted on crossing the street. "Concentrate, Julie," she said softly, cracking the eggs with force into the bowl. Deep down, she laughed, remembering the faces he made when she passed by there, or the gossip that Pearl always brought with a mischievous smile on her face. Old Pearl had appeared the day before, her eyes shining with amusement. "Have you noticed how he stares at you, Julie? If I did not know you hated each other, I would say it is passion." "Mrs. Pearl, Dempsey cannot even look properly at his own breads. Imagine looking at me," Julie replied, spinning the whisk as if it were a defensive weapon. "He does look. I saw it. He observes your every step when you are distracted." "You are imagining things," the baker countered, but the seed of doubt was already planted. At night, lying on the improvised mattress in the back of the shop, she would replay every scene, the biting provocation, his scent that mixed coffee with cinnamon, and that half-smile he tried to hide when he dropped some sarcastic comment. Julie hated herself for feeling her heart accelerate every time he appeared at the door, but deep down, that exchange of barbs was what gave her the energy to continue. Caleb, for his part, started his shift with the same irritation as always. While he prepared the breads, he heard her voice from across the street, shouting orders to the bricklayers who were finalizing the details. "The shelf goes there, near the window, not the door," she would scream, followed by a laugh that echoed in the deserted street. He tried to pretend he did not hear, but he counted every laugh, and that bothered him like a stone in his shoe. Dominic entered the kitchen and immediately noticed the boss's mood. "Good morning to the one who woke up on the wrong side of the bed." Caleb only grunted without looking back. "Let me guess, the neighbor already started the noise?" the boy teased, peeping through the window. "Well, that is why you are shaping those bagels into heart shapes again." Caleb lowered his gaze and cursed when he saw the perfectly designed dough. He crushed everything in a second and remade the breads in a hurry. "Shut up, Dominic, and go to work." "I didn't say anything special, but you thought it out loud," the baker retorted, returning to his service. Often he found himself standing still with a notepad in his hand, imagining what her grand opening would be like and mentally criticizing the excess of decorations she planned. When the customers came in to pick up warm bread, the joke was always the same, asking if he was not going to visit the new shop to check the menu. "Look at colorful sweets. I have better things to do with my life," he replied with disdain.
Mrs. Dakota, who knew him since he was a boy, rested her elbows on the counter and stared at him fixedly. "Caleb, you were never one to get so worked up like this. You look like a dog that spotted a cat and doesn't know whether to bark or run after it." "Mrs. Dakota, with all due respect," he began, but was quickly cut off. "Respect nothing. You like that girl, and that's that." "I do not like her." "You do, and what bites you is having to admit it," she finalized. Inside, Caleb kept everything. He chewed on that pride as if it were a raw and bitter dough that refused to go down his throat. Saturday dawned with a clear sky, and the street was busier than usual. Julie awoke before the sun rose, her stomach churning with nerves, but a stubborn smile was already plastered on her face. She looked through the window and saw the light of the bakery on across the way, realizing that Caleb had also jumped out of bed early. "Going to spy on the competition, Dempsey?" she murmured to herself, tying her apron. At 8 a.m., when Julie flipped the sign from closed to open, a small line was already forming at the door, gathering curious, loyal customers from the town and people who just wanted fresh gossip. The first to enter was, of course, Pearl. "I came to honor the opening," she announced loudly for the whole street to hear, "and to see if the baker across the way will have the courage to show up." Julie laughed, arranging the sweets in the display case. "He's not coming. He must be over there counting how many customers he lost." "He must be counting how many he is going to win back," Pearl countered, picking up a donut. "But between us, dear, you did a great job. It's beautiful in here." The first few hours were madness, with people entering, tasting, and complimenting, so much so that Quinn hardly could keep up with packaging the orders. On the other side of the street, Caleb observed everything. He pretended he was organizing the display case. Then he pretended he was sweeping the sidewalk again. "Boss, you have already swept this 3 times, Dominic teased, rolling his eyes. "It's dirty." "No, it's not." Caleb dropped the broom, crossed his arms, and stood there still, observing the movement at Bennett's. Around 10, the flow slowed a little. Julie went out to breathe, leaned against the door, and saw him across the street. Their eyes met. She smiled, with that provocative and victorious way that made him huff and enter the bakery. But 5 minutes later, he was crossing the street. Julie saw him approach and prepared herself, wiping her hands on her apron. Caleb entered with the bell ringing. He looked around, noticing the full tables and the sweet scent invading everything. "I came to see the circus close up," he said, with his hands in his pockets. "Did you like the show?" Julie countered, resting her hip against the counter. "It's crowded, but that's only curiosity. Next week things will return to normal." "Normal is relative. Perhaps the new normal will be you empty and me packed." He approached the counter. "Do you want to bet?" "We already bet, remember? And I'm going to win." Caleb took a pastry from the display case, examining it like someone looking for a mistake. "How much?" "This one is on the house, first and last time." He took a bite, chewed slowly, and swallowed without hurry. "And?" Julie provoked. "Is it bad?" "It's too sweet." "Liar."
It lacks balance. You do not even know how to balance your own ego, Dempsey. He finished eating, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Good luck, Bennett. You will need it." "I do not need luck. I have talent to spare." When he left, Pearl, who had heard everything from a corner table, shouted, "You two are worse than a Mexican soap opera." The entire confectionery laughed. Julie returned to the counter, her heart racing and her hands trembling from pure adrenaline. Quinn approached, whispering, "Boss, he ate the whole pastry." And he said it was bad, but there was nothing left. Julie smiled to herself, biting her lip. Yeah, he ate it. The rest of the day was intense, with good sales, compliments, and people coming back for more. When night fell and Julie finally locked the door, she sat on the floor of the shop, exhausted. Quinn sat beside her. "We did it, boss." "We did. Day 1 of many." She looked through the storefront. The bakery across the street was already closed, but the backlight was still on. He must have been doing math too, planning a counterattack, and she smiled because she knew the war was only beginning. In the second week after the opening, Julie decided to use liquid chalk to write on the window. Today there is caramel coffee brownie on the house, only until it runs out. She took great care with each letter and on purpose drew a heart at the end just to poke at her neighbor. Quinn held the ladder and observed the scene. "Boss, you have a gift for this." "For what?" "For throwing him off balance without having to say a single word." Julie smiled as she stepped down the rungs. "It is a talent I was born with." She had barely finished speaking when she heard the sound of the bakery bell right behind her. She turned without haste, trying to hold back a laugh, but without hiding the urge to provoke. "Want a coffee, Dempsey? I promise this one won't cost you a thing." Caleb was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, stubble on his face, and that low gaze but loaded with ulterior motives. "Watered-down coffee? I'd rather drink tap water." Julie took a few steps forward, stopping so close that his cologne mixed with the scent of the pastry fresh from the oven. "The problem isn't the coffee being weak, it's you who lacks the palate to handle sweetness." He let out a short laugh without humor. "And who said I have any interest in swallowing anything that comes from here?" The silence hung heavy between the two of them, as hot as the machine working inside. Julie gripped the door handle and raised her chin. "Then do everyone a favor and hold your tongue, Dempsey, before I decide to find a way to deal with it on my counter." "A creative threat? Where did you learn that? From a culinary school or from a Street Fighter's manual?" "I learned it on my own. It's just another one of my natural talents." "Your only talent is annoying those who are trying to work," he shot back. "And yours is being too easy to irritate. We complete each other perfectly," Julie fired. Caleb took a step toward her, and she did not retreat a single millimeter. They stood there, face to face, while Quinn pretended to clean the glass just to listen to the conversation. "Do you know what your biggest flaw is, Bennett? Tell me, enlighten me with your wisdom. You think sugar solves every problem, but life doesn't work that way. And you think being bitter is a personality trait, but it's actually just a lack of manners," she returned. He thought about replying, but gave up, breathing deeply while trying to regain control. He let out a muffled laugh and moved away, but not before staring at her face for a moment. "Good luck, Bennett. You're going to need it." "Luck? I have competence. You're the one who will need help when I win over all your customers." "You don't steal a customer. You earn them with quality." "Then get your tissues ready because the conquest began a long time ago," she finished. On the sidewalk, Mrs. Pearl watched the spectacle as if she were in front of a television with a cup of coffee in one hand and a bag of cookies in the other. When Caleb passed by her, the elderly woman clicked her tongue and looked at the sky. "If this were a movie, you two would have hooked up on top of a flour sack a long time ago." Caleb stopped for a moment without looking at her. "If it were a movie, I would ask them to cut the scene right now." Pearl gave a laugh, pointing her finger in his direction. "If it were a movie, my son, you would be the first to ask for a retake." "Don't you have any work to do today, Mrs. Pearl?" "I certainly do, but watching you two fly off the handle is much better than any chore." The weeks followed in this manner, with barbs in the morning and sideways glances at dusk. Julie invented a new treat every day, from complimentary coffee to filled donuts and decorated cups, and Caleb responded in kind, staying later at the bakery, increasing production and testing recipes that strayed from the traditional. Dominic didn't let anything slip by. "Boss, we made more this week than the entire last month." "It's a reflection of the new bread we're making." "Or it's a reflection of the neighbor." "It's the bread, Dominic." "But admit that having her around makes you work better." Caleb simply pointed to the pantry. "Go check the flour stock. Now, move it." On one of those nights, Caleb stayed alone until late. The assistant had already left, and the oven was cold, leaving the bakery in absolute silence. He wiped the counter calmly, making slow movements while his head drifted far away. He thought about the old recipes and the way his grandmother prepared cinnamon bread every Sunday. He remembered his grandfather saying that those who truly make bread don't sleep, they only dream of the dough. And inevitably, he ended up thinking of Julie. He thought of that smile full of mockery and the way she bit her lip when she held back an insult, always with some stain of sugar lost on her arm or on the tip of her nose. Outside, the light from her shop flickered very faintly in the darkness. Caleb crossed the street with his hands in his pockets, making up an excuse to himself that he was only going to check if everything was in order, but deep down he knew it was a lie, and he crossed because he felt like it. As he leaned near the glass, he heard the sound of a muffled laugh coming from inside. Julie was sitting on the floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes, humming some random song while kicking some papers and testing a new frosting. He gave a light tap on the door and she jumped, standing up quickly with a streak of pink cream smudging her face. "Are you lost around here?" she fired off, wiping her nose with her hand and making the stain worse. Caleb held his breath slowly, looking at the mess of sweets. "Are you going to rest, or do you intend to clog the neighborhood with sugar until no one can stand the smell anymore?" Julie crossed her arms and stared at the baker closely. "Are you going to want to sweep my entrance again, Dempsey? Are you trying to scare away those who buy from me?" "I don't need to do anything. They'll leave on their own when they get sick of so much molasses."
Sweets do not make anyone sick. What is tiring is that bitterness of yours, she shot back. He gave a short laugh. This sidewalk is also my responsibility. Do not forget that. Julie lifted her chin with petulance. Your sidewalk is that one over there on the other side. Here, I am the one in charge, and even the floor obeys me. The floor? He arched his eyebrow. Now you have taken to talking to the floor tiles? It is much better than wasting my breath on you. But you are here talking to me now, only because you came to annoy me in the middle of my work. I only came to check if everything was all right, he justified. And for what reason would you do that? Caleb froze for a moment, not knowing what to say or not wanting to admit the truth to himself. Because a fire in this confectionery would end up affecting the entire street. Julie took a step forward, narrowing her eyes. Liar. I am not. Yes, you are. You came here because you were dying of curiosity to know what I was doing, if I was alone or if I needed a hand. The two of them stood in silence, holding each other's gaze without blinking. The tension between the glass and the door seemed to pull one toward the other, but the pride of each one spoke louder. Caleb clicked his tongue and started to turn to leave. Good night, Bennett. Sleep well, if you even can, she whispered, loud enough for him to hear. He stopped halfway but did not look back, only replied with his deep voice, You too, and headed to his side of the street. The next morning, Mrs. Pearl was already on standby for hunting for news. She bought a bread from Caleb and a sweet from Julie, stopping in the middle of the asphalt to look at the two of them. I swear that if you two do not work things out soon, I will open my own cafe just to force the two of you to kiss in the checkout line. Julie, who was cleaning the counter with vigor, shouted back, You can open it, Mrs. Pearl. I just cannot guarantee the kiss because no one here wastes material on nonsense. Caleb did not let it slide and answered from the other side. If a kiss solved my problems, I would lock up the bakery right now. Pearl gave a smile of satisfaction. Then keep working, my son, keep working. As night fell, Julie closed the shop and sat on the entrance step, feeling her body worn out and her hands trembling from exhaustion after so many hours without sleep. For the first time, discouragement tried to appear, and the fear of failing or of seeing Caleb winning the dispute crossed her mind. But soon she remembered his face and the way he challenged her, which served to renew her strength. Watch out, Dempsey. I am still going to win this fight even if I have to take you down with me, she murmured to the wind, laughing to herself. In the bakery, Caleb closed the accounts for the day, while Dominic put what was left back on the shelves. The people on the street are commenting that the two of you would make a beautiful couple. Caleb let out a sound of contempt.
People who like each other are the ones who get married. The two of us hate each other." Dominic smiled from the corner of his mouth, unfazed. "Then explain to me why you have that smile on your face every time you finish fighting with her." "I do not smile at all," he lied. "Yes, you do. I saw it. Mrs. Pearl saw it, and the rest of the town did too," Dominic insisted, without fear of his boss's scowl. Caleb preferred silence, simply standing there observing the reflection of the neighboring sign that would not stop flickering in the glass of his window. On the inside, he brooded over the thought that perhaps life was simpler when silence dominated the street, when the territory was his alone, and there was no absurd need to prove anything to anyone, especially to her. The problem was that he did not feel the slightest desire to return to that old peace, and discovering this left his nerves on edge. That night, the street finally plunged into darkness, but the dispute between the two remained very much alive, burning in a slow way, mixing the salt of sweat with the sweetness of sugar. It was a tension that warmed much more than any oven's embers, and gave no signs that it was going to burn out anytime soon. Pearl, already lying down and looking at the ceiling of her room, let out a low laugh before closing her eyes. "Those two are still going to have beautiful children for me," she commented to the walls. She fell asleep satisfied, amidst dreams that mixed wedding parties with immense cakes of 3 stories.
The sun had barely appeared when Julie passed in front of the Dempsey bakery, her arms crossed and a messy bun leaving several loose strands of hair. She carried a smile on the corner of her mouth that would cause Caleb to lose sleep if he could imagine what was crossing her mind. He had scattered posters all over the block announcing a bagel promotion with courtesy coffee, and Julie stopped before one of them, analyzing every letter as if she were deciphering a code. "Free coffee," she murmured, holding back a laugh. "How generous of you, Baker, but I have much better plans for your advertising." She tore off one of the papers and tucked it into her pocket, not out of malice, but to study her adversary's moves, since knowing the other side was the first step toward victory. Back at the pastry shop, she called Quinn, her assistant, who was quick on the trigger and never missed a joke. "Quinn, I have a special mission for you." The girl dropped the tray of sweets with wide eyes. "A mission? Like espionage, or a mission to go get flour at the market?" "The kind we do not discuss with anyone," Julie replied, lowering her voice. Quinn leaned in, entering the spirit of conspiracy. "I am in. What is the plan?" Julie pulled up a chair and sat facing her assistant, resting her elbows on her knees. "Tonight, the bakery will receive an unexpected visit." "You are going to invade his territory?" Quinn exclaimed, surprised. Julie bit the tip of her pen, thoughtful. "Invading is such a heavy word. I prefer to call it an artistic intervention." "An artistic intervention?" Quinn repeated, trying not to laugh. "Exactly." Julie shrugged. "Nobody said this dispute would be clean, and he started it by spreading paper all over the street. It is only fair that I respond in kind." "Boss, you are not right in the head, but I like that about you. So you're with me on this?" Quinn hesitated for a second, glancing at the street before confirming. "I will keep watch, but if the police show up, I don't even know you." "Deal." The two of them high-fived, sealing the agreement. In the early hours of the morning, when the street was deserted and even Mrs. Pearl had already retired for the night, Julie checked the activity through the crack of the storefront window. Caleb was already home, as he kept the old habit of closing early on Saturdays. She crossed the street without haste, feeling the adrenaline rise with every step, while Quinn pretended to check her phone leaning against a post, watching the corners. Julie tested the doorknob, and, as expected, it was locked, but she had observed Caleb's habits long enough to know that he left a spare key under the withered plant pot that he never watered. "Far too predictable," she whispered, picking up the cold metal. She entered the bakery with her heart beating in her throat. The smell of resting dough dominated the environment, an honest aroma that almost made her give up. She passed the counter where the Dempsey family plaque shone timidly in the dark and went straight to the kitchen. "There will be a show tomorrow, Baker," she said softly, opening the refrigerator. She saw the trays of ready bagels and the jars of filling labeled with that crooked handwriting she already knew well. Julie took a piping bag and began to write on top of the lids, "Try the ones at Bennett's, they are better."
On other jars, she drew hearts and placed her initial, all with a speed that left her breathless. Before leaving, she looked at the workbench and saw his recipe notebook open, full of manual notes and corrections on the margins. She felt a flash of respect, but quickly managed to regain her focus. She left a short note on the table, nothing personal, just business. She locked the door, returned the key to its hiding place, and ran to Quinn, who was waiting anxiously. Well, did it work? Julie showed her hands, which were still shaking. I did it. Tomorrow will be an unforgettable day. Or a total disaster. The best stories are both things at the same time, Julie replied, feeling a mixture of guilt and childish joy as she walked away. The following day, Caleb arrived for work early, as he did every day of his life. First, he checked the register. Everything was fine. Then he went to the refrigerator, and when he opened the door, he froze in place. The jars were all scribbled with whipped cream, hearts, arrows, and that sentence that was the worst of all, "Try it at Bennett's." He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and opened them again, hoping it was a mirage. No, he grumbled to himself. He closed the door, counted to 3, and opened it once more. No, no, no. Dominic arrived through the back and, noticing his boss's expression, immediately realized the atmosphere had turned heavy. From the counter, the assistant shouted, asking if everything was in order, but Caleb only gripped the note tightly, his hand firm but loaded with a rage that almost overflowed. He showed the paper to the young man. "Do you see this right here?" The young man read the message out loud and tried to hold back a laugh, but couldn't hide it. Caleb pointed his finger, his voice coming out hoarse with irritation. "If you laugh, you're out on the street right now." "But boss," Dominic cleared his throat, trying to regain his seriousness, "let's admit that it's a little bit funny." "Funny," Caleb repeated, raising his voice. "She broke into my bakery." "Technically, she just walked in. A break-in would be if she had broken the glass or something," the assistant commented. Caleb breathed deeply through his nose, releasing the air slowly so not to explode. "Funny is going to be when I cross this street right now. Boss, maybe you should stay calm and—" "Dominic?" "Yes? Be quiet." On the sidewalk, the one following every movement was Mrs. Pearl, sitting on the park bench with coffee in her hand and the newspaper on her lap. She had the best seat to watch the spectacle that morning. When Caleb left the shop, huffing and stepping firmly like someone marching toward a confrontation, she raised her chin and asked, "Where are you going in such a hurry, Baker?" Caleb didn't even stop to talk. He simply let out a single word between his teeth: to solve a problem. Pearl gave a lopsided smile, her eyes shining with amusement. "Well, take care. That place heats up far too fast." Caleb passed straight by, crossing the street with heavy steps, while the elderly woman returned to her newspaper, murmuring that things were finally going to get interesting. Julie was still finishing washing the parts of the stand mixer when the front door was nearly torn from its track. The bell didn't even have time to ring properly because Caleb entered without asking permission, his face transformed by fury. "Bennett's," he shouted. She raised her face slowly, holding the dish towel while water dripped on the kitchen floor. Quinn, who was organizing the sweets in the display case, swallowed hard and looked from her boss to the intruder. "I'm going to take the trash outside." "Quinn, the trash is still here in the corner," Julie observed. "I'll take tomorrow's then, to get ahead on the work," the girl said before vanishing into the back so quickly that Julie felt like laughing. She cleaned her hands calmly and forced the most cynical expression she could find. "Well, look at that. Did you decide to show up before your scheduled time?" Caleb threw the note on top of the counter, his fingers tense from so much accumulated anger. "Can you explain to me what this means?" Julie picked up the paper, pretending to analyze the content with seriousness, turning the note from one side to the other. "It's a paper with writing. It looks like a message." "Julie," he said her name with a different weight, as if the word burned his tongue.
"I would call it innovative advertising," she replied. He leaned over the counter, supporting the weight of his body on his hands, staying so close that she could feel the heat of his breath. "You entered my property without permission." "Invasion is an ugly word. I prefer to say that I made a courtesy visit." "With no permission at all," he exclaimed, reinforcing his indignation.
Technically, the key was right there under the pot, which to me works as an invitation, she countered, seeing the smile emerge on her face without effort. You had the audacity to scribble on all of my filling jars, Caleb fired back, gripping the edge of the counter so hard that his knuckles turned white. Julie just shrugged, feeling the amusement increase. The jars were sitting there like sitting ducks, and so were the ideas. Consider it as a freedom of artistic expression. You have crossed every line, Julie, he said, and she felt her chest warm up, not out of fear, but because of that challenge that made her skin tingle. She loved it when he pronounced her name that way, chewing every letter as if she were a problem he could not solve. The limit is defined by me, and if it bothers you that much, you can start taking notes, because I intend to cross it many more times. You will try, at least, he provoked. I am not going to try, I am going to succeed, she stated with conviction. Caleb let out a dry laugh, almost like a growl that came from the back of his throat. You want war? Then that is exactly what you are going to get. She arched an eyebrow, resting her hip against the wood of the counter with total disdain. Great, you bring the bitter, I'll bring the sweet. Bitter is honest, whereas sweet deceives. It does not deceive anything, she shot back, with a sharp smile. Sweet is addictive, and when you get addicted, you will beg for more. He leaned over the counter, looking into her eyes. I do not beg for anything, Bennett. Not yet, Julie whispered, but you will. The two of them stood still, far too close, while the tension rising between them felt like the steam from a newly opened oven. Caleb lost his breath for a second, his eyes lowered to her neck, following the trail of a drop of sweat that descended very slowly. Julie noticed the movement and decided to close in, lowering her tone of voice to something more dangerous. What is it? Do you want to mark your territory on my sidewalk now? He leaned in even further, leaving his face millimeters from hers, allowing her to see the golden nuances in his eyes that she had never noticed. I do not need to mark anything, he stated. No? She whispered, her eyes shining. Then why does it look like you're dying for it? The anger between the two of them was so great that it ended up transforming into something else, something heavy that could no longer be avoided. The tension stretched like a rope about to break. Their hearts beat in an irregular rhythm until Caleb lost his control, gripped the back of her neck with force, and pulled her to him without asking for permission or measuring the consequences. The kiss happened like an explosion, without any delicacy or care. It was a clash of teeth and shortened breaths, a muffled sound of desire that neither of them could hold back anymore. Julie clung to his apron, pressing her body against him as if she wanted no space to be left between them, while he kept her there, firm against the counter. The heat rising from his chest was alive and pulsing. She felt his touch determined, without giving any room for retreat. His lips sought space, taking everything she offered and demanding even more, and Julie responded with the same intensity, even biting his lip without fear of leaving any mark. The taste was a mixture of salt and sugar, a confusion of hatred and a longing that neither of them was ready to admit. When they finally pulled away, the air seemed to have vanished from the room. He still kept his hand on the back of her neck, their foreheads touching while they tried to process what had just happened. This right here changes absolutely nothing, he said with a hoarse voice. She gasped, feeling her lips swollen and her lipstick smeared, but with a stubborn smile emerging. It really doesn't change anything. We are still rivals, most definitely, and I am still going to beat you, Caleb stated. You will not even in your dreams, she shot back. He took a step back, as if he were waking up from a trance, ran his hair through his hair and breathed deeply, trying to understand what had come over him. Julie raised her chin, fixed her hair and ran her tongue over the lip he had bitten. Do you want that free coffee now, Dempsey? He let out a short and genuine laugh, like the kind that escapes when a situation spins out of control. Careful, Bennett. Next time I can't guarantee that I will stop. And who exactly said that I want you to stop? She provoked. The tension remained suspended in the air, the atmosphere growing thick with everything they still had to resolve.
He opened his mouth, rehearsing a sentence, but gave up and turned his back towards the exit. "That was a massive mistake," he declared without looking back. "It certainly was," she agreed, trying to catch her breath. "It will not happen again." "Most definitely not," Julie lied, feeling that the air between them was still heavy. But they both knew that was pure acting. He left, slamming the door with force, and the bells sang so loudly that it seemed to echo across the entire block. Mrs. Pearl, from her post on the park bench, raised her coffee cup as if making a toast from a distance. "Finally, those two resolved the stalemate," she exclaimed to the wind. Julie leaned against the counter, feeling her legs go weak and her heart beating in her throat. She ran her fingers over her lips that were still tingling, trying to process the taste of him that lingered there. Quinn appeared, coming from the stockroom, with her eyes nearly popping out of her face. "Boss, for the love of God, what did I just witness?" "It was nothing much." Julie tried to hide it, but her voice came out unsteady. "Nothing? You two nearly knocked the counter over on top of yourselves," the girl exclaimed, incredulous. Julie let out a nervous laugh, the kind that escapes when a situation spins out of control. "It was just pent-up anger, Quinn." "Anger?" the assistant repeated. There was nothing of hatred in that. It looked more like a fire about to explode. "It was anger, I guarantee it," Julie insisted, although the smile on the corner of her mouth gave her completely away. Quinn crossed her arms, still processing the scene. "Well, if that right there is your way of being angry, then I'm also in need of an enemy like that right now." Julie remained there, standing against the wood, feeling her entire body vibrate with an energy she didn't recognize. She murmured very softly, only for the walls of the pastry shop to hear, "You can bet on it, Dempsey. Next time, I don't intend to stop either."
Julie opened her eyes well before the alarm clock rang, sitting on the edge of the bed with her breath still uneven, feeling as if that contact from the previous day were still happening right there in the bedroom. She ran the tips of her fingers over her lips, feeling a slight sting, a physical reminder that it had not been a dream, and as much as she tried to hold back a laugh, satisfaction finally won. "Big deal. It was just a moment of anger," she said to the ceiling, trying to convince herself of a blatant lie. It was not just anger, and she was fully aware of that. It was a mixture of provocation with a desire she refused to name, because giving it a name would be the same as accepting defeat, and Julie Bennett did not give up to anyone, much less to the neighbor. Downstairs, the atmosphere of the pastry shop held a heavy silence, but the energy of what occurred at the counter seemed to be impregnated in the air. Julie stared at herself in the bathroom mirror, noticing her lipstick slightly out of place and her hair in a mess that memory insisted on explaining. There was a small reddish mark on her neck that made her question if it had been a stumble or the pressure of his hand. She rolled her eyes at her own reflection, but could not contain the smile. "Caleb Dempsey, I am still going to drown you in chocolate syrup." She took a quick shower and chose an outfit that flattered her, repeating to herself that it was not to impress anyone just because she felt like it. She tied back her hair, touched up her makeup, and gave the final verdict before the mirror. "You look great, Julie, and he can just deal with it." Downstairs, while the coffee maker grunted and the donuts were organized, the to-do list competed with the persistent image of Caleb. He was no longer just the annoying baker from across the street. He was the man who held her with a will that asked for no permission for anything. Quinn entered the shop with her eyes flashing with curiosity. "Boss, I need the details right now." "Details of what?" Julie tried to play dumb. "Of what happened yesterday. The neighborhood already has its sharp tongues wagging." "Those people need to find a tub of clothes to wash," Julie shot back, almost letting the cup slip from her hand. The assistant sat on the counter, resting her face in her hands. "Tell me already, was it as good as it looked?" Julie opened and closed her mouth, letting out a sigh of surrender. "It was an outburst of anger, that is all." "Anger that leaves a mark on the skin?" Quinn provoked, pointing to her boss's neck. Julie moved her hand to the spot, startled. "What mark?" "That one right there. Small, but it is quite visible."
Julie ran to check in the reflection of the storefront window and cursed when she noticed the sign that the shower had not erased. Damn it! Just admit it, you loved what happened. I did not love anything. Liar, the girl laughed. Julie turned around with an authoritative stance. Quinn, I pay you to help me with sales, not to stay here analyzing my personal life. I can handle both functions at the same time, the girl replied, unfazed. On the other side of the street, Caleb was passing the broom on the sidewalk with exaggerated force, as if he wanted to erase any trace of impure thought along with the dirt. He tried to convince his own brain that it meant nothing and that it was nothing more than an idiotic impulse. But the taste of Julie remained alive in his memory, just like the way she pulled him by the apron and that low sound she let out, a noise that he continued hearing on loop, even with the noise of traffic beginning. Dominic appeared at the door, noticing his boss's agitation. "Good morning, boss." Caleb only let out a grunt that could barely be interpreted as a greeting. "Were you able to rest?" the boy insisted. "I rested." "Did you have any interesting dreams?" Dominic smiled sideways. Caleb stopped the movement of the broom and stared at the assistant with seriousness. "Dominic, are you looking to lose your job?" "By no means, sir." "Then keep the jokes for someone who cares and go back to the stockroom." The baker tried to concentrate on work, but with every strike of the broom against the ground, it brought back the memory of her sigh to torment him. When Mrs. Pearl appeared on the horizon, holding the newspaper and a small bag of sweets that clearly had not come from his bakery, Caleb felt a punch in the middle of his chest. "Did you come to spend money or just come after gossip today, Mrs. Pearl?" he asked with a voice loaded with irony. The elderly woman adjusted the newspaper under her arm with a glint of pure mischief in her eyes. "I came to see how the mood of the most talked-about man in town is." "Today is the day to find out if the most stubborn baker on the street managed to catch a wink of sleep," Pearl commented, stopping on the sidewalk with that air of someone who knows everything. Caleb leaned the broom against the wall with force and crossed his arms over his chest. "I slept very well, better than ever if you want to know." "Is that so? Well, that tired face of yours is telling a very different story." She clicked her tongue, approaching with slow steps. "Liar. Today you have that face of someone who spent the entire night fighting with the pillow." The old woman moved closer and lowered her tone of voice, as if revealing a forbidden secret. "Do you know what the people say out there? Those who fight a lot end up kissing, and those who kiss once fight double afterward." Caleb let out a huff of impatience. Whoever invented that saying should look for a better occupation. Pearl let out a short and mocking laugh. "But I already have the best occupation in the world, which is watching the two of you burn with desire and pretend that nothing is happening." "There is no desire here," he guaranteed, trying to keep his voice steady. "No? Then try to explain what that little mark is there on your neck." Instinctively, Caleb's hand went up to cover his skin. "What mark? There is nothing here." "That very one you're trying to hide right now," she pointed out, victorious. "It's small, but it does not escape my eye." He ground his teeth and turned his back on his neighbor, entering the bakery without saying goodbye. But he still heard her shout echoing down the street for anyone who cared to hear. "Take the chance and buy a new toothbrush, Caleb, just in case that sugary taste from the confectionery doesn't come off so easily." Caleb slammed the door hard, but the sound of Pearl's laughter pierced through the glass and mixed with the smell of bread coming out of the oven. Dominic, who was observing everything from a distance, tried to disguise his amusement. "Boss, I hate to agree, but Miss Pearl has a point." "Be quiet and get back to work, Dominic." "Yes, sir, I'm done talking." Julie spent the entire morning dealing with customers who didn't hide their curiosity. Some giggled while choosing their donuts, and others were much more direct. "So the gossip is true, Julie?" a young woman asked, while biting into a filled donut. "They're saying the owner of the bakery put on quite a show in here yesterday."
Julie let out an exaggerated sigh and continued wiping the counter. He came in, did his shouting, and left. Nothing that changes my routine. But people mentioned something else. The customer leaned over the counter, lowering her volume. Is it true that the two of you kissed? Julie stopped what she was doing and faced the woman with one eyebrow raised. And who was it that spread such nonsense? Miss Pearl. Who else would it be? It had to be her, Julie muttered. But so, is it true or not? Julie pointed to the sweets in the display case with an ironic smile. The next question of that kind will cost the price of one more donut on your order. The young woman burst into laughter and understood she would not get anything else out of her, took her bag and left, still laughing. Inside, Julie struggled not to smile, thinking that if the rumor ran wild, it would eventually reach his ears. At the bakery, Caleb tried to maintain an indifferent pose, but every burst of laughter coming from the neighboring shop felt like a poke at his sanity. He checked the change more than once, folded the napkins with unnecessary force, and arranged the trays that were already aligned. He looked sideways through the window and saw Julie tossing her hair back while serving the public, acting as if that kiss had never happened or as if he were invisible. And it was precisely that apparent calm of hers that made him more irritated than any direct provocation. Dominic, stacking the bagels for sale, whispered without looking at his boss, "Boss, be real with me. Is something going on?" Caleb fixed his gaze at his assistant with a dangerous intensity. The only thing going on here is work. The rest is talk from people who have nothing better to do. But Pearl went around spreading that you two were already almost setting the wedding date. Caleb turned abruptly, pretending he needed to adjust the bread shelf, which was already impeccable. If you do not get back to work right now, I am going to make you scrub the inside of the oven with a toothbrush. Is that clear? It is, sir. Crystal clear. Great. Then move. At lunchtime, when the movement slowed, Julie decided it was the ideal moment to poke at her rival. She pushed the bakery door open without ceremony, bringing Quinn right behind her, who carried a brown paper bag with a complicit smile on her face. "Baker!" she called with a firm voice, making the sound echo through the hall that was empty at that moment. Caleb, on the other side of the counter, did his best not to show the impact of her presence, trying to control the rhythm of his heart that insisted on accelerating just by hearing that tone of voice. He turned slowly, maintaining a pose of indifference. "Do you not see that there are people in line?" Julie looked around, seeing nothing but the deserted hall and Dominic pretending to clean the shelves in the back. "What line? Everyone is over at my shop, losing their minds over my sweets." "Liar," he retorted between his teeth. "Well, go over there and check. I doubt you have the courage to see the success of your neighbor with your own eyes." He remained where he was, because deep down he feared she was telling the truth. Julie smiled with an air of victory and dropped the bag on the counter. "I brought a donut sample for you to discover, finally, what a real sweet is." Caleb pulled the packaging closer and smelled the aroma of vanilla mixed with a touch of chocolate and something citrusy rising from there, arcing an eyebrow at her. "And now you decided you want to give me a lesson? Are you going to try to teach me my own craft, Bennett?" She leaned her hip against the wood, holding his gaze with a soft and provocative expression. "Not a lesson, just in case you take a liking to it and end up becoming dependent on my seasoning." Caleb went around the counter and stood right in front of her, ignoring the safe distance, which made Quinn discreetly retreat to the sidewalk so as not to disturb the atmosphere. "Too much sweet usually makes me nauseous," he stated in a low voice. Julie moistened her lips, following the movement of his mouth before facing his eyes again. "Then stay there with that sour way of yours. It seems it is the only thing you know how to cultivate." "And it's working, isn't it?" he asked. "Oh, absolutely. It's working so well that the customers leave here almost running in fear of that bad mood of yours." Caleb squeezed the paper bag, crumpling the top without looking away from her. "I am not going to taste any of this." Julie shrugged, already preparing to leave. "Then throw it in the trash if you prefer. But when curiosity wins and you take that first bite, try not to forget about me." "And why would I remember you?" She stopped at the doorway and looked over her shoulder. "Because it's going to be the best thing that ever passed through your mouth, and it will be a nightmare for you to have to admit it." The door closed and the bell rang loudly, leaving Caleb alone with that package that felt like it was burning his hands. Dominic appeared suddenly with a little smirk. "So, are you going to go for it?" "I'm not touching that." "Right, tell me another one." Caleb waited for his assistant to go back to the kitchen, took a deep breath, and actually threw the bag into the trash, but the hesitation lasted only a few seconds. He looked around, made sure he was alone, rescued the donut, and took a generous bite. He closed his eyes as he felt the texture of the dough, chewing slowly while processing the impeccable flavor before swallowing. "Damn it," he grumbled to the walls. "This is way too good." Later, while Caleb tried to organize the display case to distract his mind, a strange man entered the establishment. The man was tall, wore a t-shirt that seemed too tight for his size, and carried expensive sunglasses hanging from his collar, displaying a confident smile that made Caleb arc his eyebrows immediately. "Nice spot you have here," the stranger let out. "Thank you," Caleb replied dryly. The man ordered 2 bagels, paid without questioning the price, but remained there leaning against the counter, observing the movement on the street through the window. "You were that Dempsey fellow, right?" "That's me." "I heard a new confectionery opened around here, something called Bennett's Bakery. Is it right around here?" Caleb felt an immediate discomfort, squeezing the change tightly in the palm of his hand. "It's right there in front." The fellow smiled in a way that seemed to want to test someone's patience. "They said the place is very charming and that the owner manages to be even more interesting." Caleb leaned over the counter, staring at the man closely with narrowed eyes. "Did you come here to buy food or to conduct a survey on other people's lives?" The stranger laughed, raising his hands in a sign of peace. "Take it easy, partner. I'm new to the area and I'm just trying to find my way." "Well, find your way by buying what you need. Free gossip you can find at another counter," Caleb ended the subject. The fellow took his order and left laughing, leaving the baker with a strange feeling in his chest. And the fellow went straight, as was to be expected, to her shop. Caleb watched everything through the window, saw him go in, saw Julie flash a smile, and felt something burn inside. A type of primitive discomfort that he tried to label as simple irritation, but it was jealousy, pure and true, though he would never admit it.
Julie was organizing the brownies in the display case when she noticed a shadow at the door, turning around with that professional tone she used for strangers. "Hi, welcome." The man, who carried the name Ethan embroidered on the uniform of a new company in the region, displayed a practiced smile of someone who deals with the public all day long. "I came to find out if what they are saying out there has any merit." She gave a light laugh. "It depends on what they have been spreading. What was it that you heard?" "That the best sweet in the region is behind this counter," Ethan said with a smooth voice, letting his gaze travel through the shop before returning to her. Julie maintained her posture without letting herself be carried away by the cheap charm. "Then try it, but the payment comes before the first bite." He let out a loud laugh while pulling out his wallet. "I like your style, straight to the point." "Time is a rare commodity," she countered. The two continued in that idle chatter, with him leaning on the counter pouring out exaggerated compliments and technical marketing terms that Julie knew well. Across the sidewalk, Miss Pearl watched the show from a front row seat, seeing Caleb leave the bakery with heavy steps and an unfriendly expression. He stopped on the sidewalk with his arms crossed, watching the exchange of laughter between them, and the anger boiled in a way that he could no longer ignore. Pearl coughed loudly, forcing his attention to herself, and when Caleb looked, she wore a malicious smile. "Go on and greet the neighbor, Caleb. Show who is in charge of this piece of asphalt." "Mind your business, Miss Pearl," he retorted with clenched teeth. "Too late to be discreet, my boy. The town has already noticed the movement, and you should be in there too. I have nothing to do in there. Go on before that one makes himself a little too much at home," she advised. Ethan finished his purchase, took his box of sweets, and left accompanied by Julie to the door. However, Caleb was already in the way, blocking the passage with a sharp look.
"So, were my bagels to your liking?" he asked with a hard voice. The man stopped, measured Caleb from top to bottom, and smirked. "The breads are good, but her sweets are in another category, unbeatable." Caleb ground his jaw, stepping a little closer. "Enjoy it well. She loves to give out samples to anyone passing by." Ethan adjusted his sunglasses, letting out a provocative chuckle. "I will accept every single one of the samples she is willing to offer me," he said, following his path while savoring the small victory. Caleb stood there for a second with his fists clenched before entering the confectionery without any ceremony. Julie raised her face, holding back the urge to laugh at the situation. "Any problem, Baker?" He stepped toward the counter, resting his hands firmly on the surface. "Who is that flashy fellow?" She smiled, wiping a bit of leftover frosting with a finger with a calmness calculated to get under his skin. "A customer," Caleb growled. He seemed much more interested in the owner than in the menu. "And what is it to you?" Julie leaned forward, getting so close that her perfume took over his space. "Is this jealousy by any chance, Dempsey?" "Do not be ridiculous. It's not jealousy, it's just an observation," he tried to correct himself. Julie smiled in a dangerous way. "The shop is mine, the candy is mine, and if I decide, the customer can be mine too." Caleb gripped the edge of the counter so hard that his knuckles turned white. Anger was fighting a losing battle with the desire he was trying to suffocate. "Be careful with what you say, Bennett." She lifted her chin and whispered, ensuring only he would hear. "I should be the one saying, 'Be careful, Dempsey.' If I wanted that man, he would already be in my hands. But he does not interest me in the slightest." "No, not at all. And for what reason?" he wanted to know. She pulled away with an enigmatic smile. "Because I've always had a soft spot for what is difficult to handle, and you are the most complicated person that has ever stepped foot on this street." The atmosphere in the place grew thick, charged with an electricity that seemed ready to cause a short circuit. Miss Pearl watched everything from the square, devouring her muffin as if it were the main scene of a movie. "These two are still going to be the death of me, but what a performance they are giving." There, between the exchanging of barbs and denials, the two knew something they didn't have the courage to say out loud. What truly bothered them was not the fighting or the presence of third parties, but the taste of that kiss that neither of them could erase from their memory. It was the mark that each had left on the other, the certainty that sooner or later they were going to end up meeting in that kiss again, and next time neither of them would have the slightest intention of stopping.
Autumn finally made its appearance, staining the sidewalks of Main Street with hues that resembled cake frosting, ranging between yellow, orange, and a deep, dark red that clung to the soles of shoes. Julie watched the movement while leaning against the doorframe of the bakery, maintaining a discreet smile as the town took on that old movie atmosphere, with the cold wind dragging the debris from the trees and the scent of cinnamon taking over the corners. Inside, she still felt the trace of that forbidden contact, a memory that should not have been there, but remained etched like something persistent in the depths of her mind. Quinn emerged with a fresh batch of brownies, leaving the heavy aroma of chocolate in the air. "Boss, you are aware that he has not taken his eyes off this place, right?" Julie arched her eyebrow, pretending to be clueless. "And who exactly are you talking about?" The assistant let out an impatient huff and pointed discreetly toward the street. "The baker, who has already crossed this sidewalk about 6 times today alone, acting as if he is monitoring whether your window glass is going to break on its own." Julie did not bother to turn around. She simply wiped a bit of syrup from her finger with a calculated calmness. If it broke, he would be the first one to show up with the glue. "You love playing with fire?" Quinn commented, shaking her head. "I really do. And the danger lives right across the street," Julie replied with a glint in her eyes. "One day this tension between you two is going to end in an explosion," the girl smiled. "I certainly hope so," Julie concluded. On the other side of the street, Caleb was pushing the broom across the floor for the umpteenth time, while Dominic and the other boys were doubling over with laughter, hiding behind the crates of merchandise. "If you keep going at this pace, boss, you are going to end up digging a hole to the basement," one of them teased. "Or you will need a new broom before winter even arrives," the other added. Caleb did not give them any credit. The straw of the broom scraped the cement with a force that made it seem as if he were sharpening a tool. Every time the bell of the neighboring shop rang, his jaw tightened immediately. He tried to maintain the posture of someone who did not care at all, but every laugh of hers or every greeting the customers offered Julie seemed to pierce through the glass and poke at an open wound. Dominic approached, pretending to organize the stock. "Boss, can I give you a tip?" "You can, but I'm warning you now that I do not guarantee my patience," Caleb replied, without stopping what he was doing. "You have been sweeping the exact same leaf for about 15 minutes. Caleb froze his movement and stared at the floor, seeing that the leaf remained in the same spot. "And what is the problem?" "The problem is that perhaps it would be easier for you to go over there and talk to her before some fellow shows up and takes the lead," Dominic suggested. Caleb leaned the broom against the wall with a dry thud. "There is no fellow showing up." "Yes, there is. That guy in the elegant coat who was around here yesterday." "That clown?" Caleb retorted, feeling the irritation rise. "That is the one," the assistant confirmed. The baker entered the shop with heavy footsteps, and when he came face to face with Mrs. Pearl, he already prepared for what was coming. She was there, with her coffee and a knitted scarf, displaying a wide smile that never brought anything good. "Good morning to the grumpiest baker on this street," she greeted. "Speak up, Pearl," he grumbled. She laughed heartily, demonstrating that she did not have a shred of shame. "Did you manage to sleep in peace?" Caleb stopped moving at the counter and stared at the lady. "I did." "And did you have any special dreams?" she asked, with that mellow voice of someone who knows even what she should not. "Or better yet, did you dream about someone made of flesh and bone?" Caleb clenched his teeth. "Did you come to pick up your order, or did you come to distill venom this early?" The Purel looked lingeringly at the display window of the confectionery across the way. "I do not need to say anything, Caleb. It's all written on your face." "There is nothing written here," he insisted, going back to handling the loaves of bread that were already lined up. She let out a scoffing sound, finding amusement in his denial. "Yes, there is. Her taste is still there, and you are scared to death of admitting it." "Mrs. Pearl, please." "And do you know what else you're afraid of?" she continued, ignoring the protest. "Of admitting that you want her nearby, of seeing her walk away, and that another man might have the courage you lack to step up." Silence took over the counter, suddenly becoming dense. Pearl shrugged and took her order. "But I'm just an old woman who talks too much, am I? Not?" She left the shop calmly, leaving Caleb alone with the noise of his own thoughts. That same morning, Ethan appeared again, entering the shop wearing a dark coat and a watch that shined on his wrist, exhaling a perfume that was far too strong for the standards of the town. Julie noticed his silhouette through the glass before the door was opened. Perfect, she thought to herself. Time to poke the baker. Ethan broke into a wide smile, spreading that fragrance through the air. "Julie, I came to pick up those sweets you promised yesterday." Quinn exchanged a quick glance with her boss, holding back the laughter that insisted on rising up her throat. Julie adjusted her strands of hair calmly, like someone preparing for a match. "Ethan, right? Of course. Sit there at that table, and I'll get everything ready." She began to move through the shop with a practiced lightness, conscious that on the other side of the street there were attentive eyes following her every step. "So, Ethan, you mentioned you work with what exactly?" "Digital marketing. I just arrived in town. New company and new life," he replied. "Brave of you," she commented. He approached the counter, resting his arms on the wood. "You are as well. Opening a confectionery right next to a bakery this old could be courage or total madness." Julie smiled thinly. "It's a bit of both. The best choices in life are usually like that." On the outside, Caleb froze his movement with the broom. Dominic noticed the atmosphere and cleared his throat. "Boss, is everything all right over there?" Caleb narrowed his eyes, trying to see better through the neighboring window. Why did that fellow decide to show his face again? He must be a customer. He looks like he has money, doesn't he? A customer, or is he after something else other than sweets? The assistant couldn't help himself and let out a low laugh. "Boss, if you're dying of jealousy, just cross the street and settle this." "I don't feel jealous of anything." "Then why are you crushing the broom handle in your hand?" Caleb looked down and saw his fingers completely strained from the force he was applying. He eased his grip and did not say a word. He simply leaned the broom and crossed the street without weighing the consequences. Mrs. Pearl, from her official post on the park bench, waved her newspaper as if giving the signal for the start of a fight. "Go get 'em, Caleb. Show them who is in charge around here." Inside the shop, Ethan continued with his idle talk. "Is this brownie recipe your own invention?" Julie leaned against the counter, tilting her body forward with a millimetrically calculated smile. "It is a family recipe, full of secrets." "I bet it is." "But secrets are earned over time. You do not just go around telling everyone," she teased. Ethan lowered his tone of voice, using that masculine charm. "Trust is earned. I could try to pay with a few dinners." Julie raised her eyebrow, running her tongue quickly over the corner of her mouth. "You would have to prove that the risk is worth it." At that exact moment, Caleb entered and the doorbell rang like a sharp snap in the silence. He stopped at the entrance with his arms crossed and heavy breathing. Ethan turned around, noticing the presence of the baker, and extended his hand in that corporate manner. "Caleb, how's it going?" Caleb ignored the greeting, keeping his hands firm. "I've seen you around here before." Julie forced a look of someone who knew nothing, but her eyes gave away the amusement. "Do you want some sweets, Dempsey? Today the frosting is special." He stared at her fixedly with a loaded gaze. "I am seeing exactly the kind of frosting you are serving." Ethan realized that the atmosphere had become heavy and moved to take his leave. "Well, I think I should be on my way. Julie, we'll talk later. You have my contact." Before leaving, he lightly touched her waist, a quick and casual gesture that Julie allowed only to test her neighbor's reaction. Caleb saw the movement and felt his blood boil, while Quinn vanished to the back of the shop so she would not get caught in the middle. As soon as the door closed, Caleb advanced to the counter, standing so close that her perfume mingled with his irritation. "What is your plan now?" he growled, resting his hands on the workbench. Julie continued cleaning the furniture with a cloth, pretending to be calm. "Plan? It's just a new customer in town. I need to be receptive to those who arrive." Caleb let out a bitter laugh. "Receptive or too available?" She stopped what she was doing and faced the baker up close, chest to chest, without looking away. "Is this bothering you, Dempsey?" He arched his eyebrow, sustaining the provocation for a few seconds. "Not at least." "Then try to pretend better, because it's written on your forehead that you're foaming with rage," she whispered, distilling venom. "There is nothing written here." "Yes, there is. You came running over here. You almost broke down my door." "I only came to see if you needed any help," he lied. "Liar," she countered, bringing her face closer to his. "Careful, Bennett," he warned with a heavy voice. "Careful is what I say, Dempsey, because if I were really interested in that fellow, he would already be in my hand," she countered, without backing down. "And are you?" he wanted to know, his voice failing for a second. Silence took over the counter while her eyes went down to his mouth and up again, sustaining his gaze. "No. No. I do not feel the slightest attraction to what comes easy. I prefer what is complicated to solve." Caleb exhaled forcefully and took a step back, sounding almost breathless. "You are still going to drive me completely insane." "That's exactly my goal," Julie smiled. He turned and left without looking back, while Mrs. Pearl, over on the corner, gave a thumbs up. Julie leaned against the wood, feeling her heart racing, and whispered to herself that she had just hooked the baker. The rest of the week was a kind of torture disguised under the work routine. Ethan appeared 3 other times, always more smiling, loud, and trying to force an intimacy that didn't exist. He handed out compliments to the coffee and bought boxes of sweets that he didn't even get to eat, only to have the pretext of leaving notes written with that standard masculine handwriting. "Lunch on Friday? Dinner on Saturday? Can I test the new item before everyone else?" Julie read each one and kept them in a small box hidden under the counter, which did not escape Quinn's eyes. "Do you intend to answer any of these invitations, boss?" "I don't know yet." "But you can't stand this guy," the assistant observed. "I really can't." "Then what's the point of keeping these messages?" Julie looked through the display window and saw Caleb pretending he wasn't paying attention to the movement in her shop. "It's fuel for what is to come," she smiled. On the other side of the sidewalk, Caleb recorded every detail, every piece of paper handed over, every forced smile, and every time Ethan's hand touched Julie's arm. Inside him, a hunger grew that no bread could appease. He gnawed at jealousy in the corner of the bakery while throwing flour with disproportionate force, even burning entire batches out of pure lack of attention. Dominic whispered to his coworker, noticing the boss's state. "The boss is acting like an animal guarding his territory. I've never seen him like this." "Tell me about it. Yesterday he lost half a batch of bagels, something he never does." Mrs. Pearl, as usual, appeared to add fuel to the fire early on. "Caleb, dear, I heard around that this Ethan fellow is going to show up with flowers tomorrow." "He organized the loaves with unnecessary violence. That is his problem, not mine." "The problem is entirely yours, my dear. That man is determined to win over the confectioner, and she does not seem to be rejecting the advances." She laughed, teasingly. "She makes sweets, Mrs. Pearl. She did not sign an exclusivity contract with anyone." "She makes promises, Caleb, and promises of that kind tend to be quite tempting." The elderly woman winked, full of ulterior motives. On Friday night, Caleb saw when Ethan entered the confectionery carrying a small bouquet, and something inside him finally snapped. On Saturday, he closed up shop early, crossing the street with long, determined strides as the town began to fall silent. He pushed the door of the confectionery without asking permission and entered, finding Julie at the counter, removing her work apron. She felt his presence, the familiar scent and the heat he emanated even before she turned around. The silence that settled in was louder than any argument they had ever had. She spun around slowly, facing him. "Decided to close your doors early today?" He walked toward her, his breathing heavy, as if he were holding a fire in his chest. "Enough," he declared, cutting through the air. Julie raised her eyebrow, making a massive effort to keep her voice steady. "Enough of what, exactly?" He clenched his jaw and took a step forward, eliminating any remaining space while speaking low in a tone that bordered on a growl. "You are mine." She let out a short laugh, loaded with a dangerous provocation. "Yours? Since when?" "Since always, and you are fully aware of that," he stated. "I do not know anything," she lied, feeling her pulse quicken. Caleb held her waist firmly, pulling her body until he pinned her against the wooden edge of the counter. "You know very well, and this theater with that guy in the suit ends now." She felt the venom mix with the desire to have him close and whispered, "And what do you intend to do to stop me, Dempsey?" He brought his face close, his mouth almost touching hers but without sealing the contact yet. "I am going to show you who is in charge here," he promised. The kiss happened suddenly, like a fuse in a powder keg, without any sign of patience or delicacy. It was a necessity that swallowed any remnant of doubt. He bit her lip, tasting the sugar mixed with the tension that had been building for days, while Julie grabbed his hair, pulling him and digging her nails into his back beneath his shirt. He lifted her off the ground with a quick movement, seating her on the counter and clearing space between jars and utensils, ignoring a tray of sweets that ended up falling and scattering crumbs across the floor. Between one failing breath and another, she tried to warn him, "And if someone passes by and sees us here?" "The town has already gone to sleep," he replied against her neck. "The one who is going to lose sleep now is you." Julie laughed between sighs, her agile hands pulling at his shirt with a haste she could not hide. "You are truly something else." "You were the one who left me in this state," he countered. Caleb continued with kisses down her neck, exploring every space with a rush that seemed to have no end, while the world outside ceased to exist and only the touch mattered. She let out a low sound, a tremor that ran through her entire body when she felt his weight against hers, a fit that only two stubborn people could create. He stared into her eyes, short of breath and with a firm voice. "I am not going to let you go. Never again." Julie smiled, pressing her body to his and surrendering to the rhythm of that moment. "Then hold me, Dempsey. Do not let me go for anything." And he held her, right there, surrounded by the smell of sugar and boxes of donuts, with the display glass becoming foggy because of the heat rising inside the shop. Every movement was a silent answer. Every muffled sigh was a confession that neither had the courage to put into words, but was clear on their skin. "Mine," he repeated with a hoarse voice of desire. "Only mine." She stretched out, her hands holding tight to his shoulders and her face hidden in his neck, muffling the sound that only he could hear. When the agitation finally gave way to a good exhaustion, the world outside continued in that silence, but inside Bennett's, everything seemed out of its original place. Caleb sought her gaze from very close while trying to make his heart return to its normal rhythm. "From now on, Bennett." She gave a crooked smile, eyes closed, and with a voice somewhat shaky. "From now on what, Baker?" He gave a light kiss on her chin and warned, "My name is Caleb. Call me Caleb and understand once and for all that you are mine." She opened her eyes slowly, staring at him with a sweet and stubborn way. "Yours? I think I need to hear that one more time to believe it." "You are mine, damn it. Understand it already." Julie let out a tired laugh, resting her head on his shoulder. "Then turn the light off already, because tomorrow our dispute starts all over again." He smiled, but in a way she had never seen before, with a glint in his eyes that finally seemed real. "There will be no more dispute." "No?" "No, because from now on, we play on the same team," he concluded. Caleb felt in the depths of his chest that the fight was over. Now there was no longer a war for territory, only the heat that united the two of them. The sign at Bennett's Bakery swayed with the light spring breeze, appearing to smile toward the other side of the street, where the old sign of Dempsey Bakery, firm on the red brick wall, responded with the same creak as always. The two seemed to exchange secrets, confidences that came from long before any kiss, any fight, or that first spark that changed everything. Inside the shop, Julie Bennett spread frosting on a batch of cupcakes organized side by side, looking like little soldiers ready for a confrontation. Her apron was all wrinkled and a stubborn lock of hair fell over her face, but she did not even need to turn around to know who was arriving. His scent always reached her first. Caleb stopped right behind her, pressing his chest against her back with his arms crossed, and that lopsided smile she knew well. He let his beard brush against her neck in a quick and almost lazy contact, but one that carried a danger Julie recognized from miles away. She let out a sigh, maintaining her focus on the work and using that usual mocking tone. "Going to sweep the sidewalk, Baker?" He released a low sound against her skin, sounding more like a jest than a real threat. "If you do not stay quiet, I will find a way to take you out of here right now." Julie laughed, without missing a movement of the piping tip. "Did you come here for a sweet or just to waste my time?" "I only accept it if it has plenty of whipped cream," he replied, resting his chin on her shoulder. Julie spun her body slowly, lifting the piping tip as if she were armed, displaying a victorious smile. "Then see to it that you close the door, Dempsey. I do not want you getting my clean floor dirty." Outside, Mrs. Pearl followed her sacred ritual, seated on the wooden bench with the crumpled newspaper in her lap and the coffee cooling between her hands. She observed the movement through the foggy display window like someone following the final chapter of a story she has already memorized, but insists on seeing again. "I certainly warned them. I warned them," grumbled the elderly woman, swaying her foot to the rhythm of a song only she could hear. Quinn, the assistant, sat down beside her while chewing on a bagel that had clearly come from the neighbor's oven. "Warned them about what, Pearl?" The little old lady turned her face with eyes shining like someone holding a trump card. "I said that those who live on bickering end up working things out, and that the kiss after the fight is always the best." Quinn let out a short laugh, wiping crumbs from her face. "And you think they're going to settle down now?" Pearl shrugged and adjusted the scarf around her neck. "This thing has no end, my dear. The trouble just moves to a different counter." Later on, the street plunged into that typical small-town tranquility, with the sound of dry leaves swirling and a few tourists stopping to admire the colorful display window of Bennett's, while a gentleman passed by carrying warm breads and hoping his wife would not notice how many he had already eaten on the way. And there came Ethan, poor thing, passing once more in front of the shop with a withered rose in his hand and without the courage to enter. He even thought about waving, but Pearl raised the newspaper as if it were an impenetrable shield. "Forget about it, young man," ensuring the message reached the ears of those passing by. "This batch has been overbaked for a long time now." When the sun hid behind the bakery roof, Caleb went about turning off the lights, turned the key in the lock, and felt the smell of flour that was already a part of him. He crossed the street without haste, like someone entering a sacred place, and passed by Pearl, who pretended to read the newspaper but could not hide the smile of satisfaction. Caleb pushed the confectionery door and entered without ceremony, finding Julie sitting on top of the counter with her legs crossed and a cup of tea forgotten between her hands. The counter was a chaos of open jars and napkins scribbled with phrases that only the two of them would know how to decipher. He stopped right in front of her, took the mug from her hands, and set it aside without the slightest care. "Did you come to fight, or did you come to taste?" she asked, with that restrained laugh on her lips that he already knew by heart. Caleb did not answer immediately. He simply held her chin between his thumb and index finger, like someone holding a promise that no one else has the right to steal. "I came to remind you who is in charge here." Julie gave a short and lazy laugh, locking her eyes onto his. "You are in charge of the bakery, Dempsey. In here, I am the one in charge." He ignored the provocation and kissed the corner of her mouth, a slow contact that spread heat through both of them, and when he moved away just enough to speak, he whispered with his mouth still pressed against her, "Command me to love you a little more." She closed her eyes and let her forehead rest against his. The cup was forgotten, and the counter seemed like the only place that existed in the world. "I command it now, tomorrow, and after. I command it always." Pearl stood up from the bench and shook the newspaper, folding it and placing it under her arm, raising the already empty coffee cup to the moon rising between the chimneys of the street. "If this street knew how to bake a cake, it would bake a wedding one right away," she commented, laughing to herself while walking to the corner and whispering to the wind. "Rivalry, as if. Those who saw it, saw it. Those who didn't, let them invent their own version." The next day, the town awoke enveloped by a scent that mixed warm breads and sweets fresh out of the oven, and a new sign appeared hanging on a crooked pole right in the middle of the block, announcing that there were no borders there, only good recipes. Julie peeked at everything through the window, with the piping tip in her hand and her heart beating at the rhythm of the smile that wouldn't leave her face. Outside, Caleb was sweeping the sidewalk, including hers, and she opened the door to shout for the whole street to hear, "Are you going to sweep my door every day now, is that it?" He looked over his shoulder and gave a lopsided smile, sweeping the leaves like someone sweeping away any doubt. "I am, until the end." She shook her head, hiding her laughter, and murmured only to herself that he would end up sweeping away her sanity too. The years passed like dough that rises in the oven in a steady and inevitable way. The Bennett sign underwent a renovation but kept the style, while the Dempsey sign became more faded, but no one dared to change it because tradition is respected. In between the two, Caleb installed a third, smaller sign on a post, Bennett and Dempsey, where the sweet meets the savory. Julie laughed when she saw the addition, but she did not order it to be removed. On a Saturday morning, the street woke up to the sound of children's laughter and mischief. Caleb opened the bakery door carrying little Owen on his shoulders, a 5-year-old boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's clever smile. The boy held a bagel in each hand. "Dad, this one turned out better than Mom's." "Careful so she does not hear that," Caleb warned, laughing. On the other side, Julie left the confectionery leading little Maeve by the hand, a 4-year-old girl curly-haired and with the attentive eyes of her grandfather Dempsey, carrying a pink cupcake that she did not share with anyone. "Mom, Owen said the bread is better than the sweet." Julie stopped and crossed her arms, staring at her husband from across the street. "Is that so, Dempsey?" Caleb lowered his son from his shoulders and also crossed his arms. He did not lie. "Oh, he did not lie. Then let us settle this matter right now," Julie advanced, with her daughter running alongside. The two met right under the new sign. Pearl, sitting on the bench as she always did, watched everything beside Quinn, who now managed the confectionery. "They never change," Quinn commented. "Yes, they do. Now the fight stays in the family," Pearl corrected, satisfied. Owen pulled his father's hand. "Dad, is Mommy going to win again?" "No," Caleb replied, but he soon leaned down to pick Maeve up when she asked. "Of course I am. I always win," Julie affirmed. "You do not," Caleb countered, holding his daughter with one arm and wrapping the other around his wife's waist. And there, in the middle of the street and with their children between them, the two kissed, a quick and routine contact that still held the same spark from years ago. Owen made a face of disgust. "Yuck! Are you two going to kiss again?" "Always," Julie replied, caressing her son's hair, while Maeve, in her father's arms, pointed toward the sky. "Look there, Daddy! A little bird!" little Maeve shouted, pointing to the sky. Caleb followed his daughter's gesture, but without letting go of the arm that enveloped Julie. "I see it, little one. The bird knows very well that Saturday is the day for us to be together." Quinn watched the scene from afar and ended up resting her head on Pearl's shoulder, feeling a good tightness in her chest. "They really deserve this peace, do you not think?" "Most definitely," Pearl agreed. "They clashed so much that they ended up conquering their own world." Later, when the sun began to disappear on the horizon, Julie and Caleb settled the children and walked together along the sidewalk, without choosing one side of the street, just walking toward the playground on the corner. Owen shot off ahead, while Maeve tried to keep the pace with her short and hurried strides. Julie rested her head on her husband's shoulder and commented softly, "Do you think these two are going to end up fighting as much as we used to fight?" "I hope so," he replied, leaving a kiss on the top of her head. "Because that will mean they love each other with the same intensity that we do." She smiled, intertwining her fingers with his firmly. "You are aware that we never stopped picking on each other, right?" "I know that, and I have no desire for that to change." "Neither do I," she confessed. Pearl, still at her post on the bench, saw the children distance themselves and decided to close the newspaper, standing up with the slowness of someone who feels the weight of the years. Quinn stepped up to offer her arm to help her. "Going home already, Pearl?" "I am, but you can be sure that tomorrow I will be here again." "For what? Their story is already settled," Quinn joked. Pearl let out a wise laugh, brushing the dust off her clothes. "A story that is worth anything never reaches an end, my dear. It only gains new pages." As the streetlights turned on, Main Street plunged into that pleasant silence, with the air perfumed by a mixture of kneaded bread and sugar. The shop signs swayed gently, appearing to converse like old acquaintances who share the secrets of a lifetime. On the wooden bench, which still held the warmth of whoever had been sitting there, remained a small piece of paper that Pearl left behind on purpose. Those who witnessed it know how it was. Those who did not should try to imagine. But those who live to this plot know that the best part of life is a good fight seasoned with affection. May the story repeat itself and be told to the next ones who pass by, for certain memories were meant to decorate the windows and the sidewalks of the town. And as for Pearl, she continues there, punching the clock every single day, waiting for the next move. And if nothing happens, she finds a way to create a new rumor. But this time, there was no need to invent anything. Julie and Caleb took care of writing every paragraph themselves, between recipes, stolen kisses, and heated discussions. In the end, what remained was the most striking flavor of all, a true love, served with a pinch of stubbornness and baked in the fire of living together, right there on the sidewalk of a town that never again forgot the names of the two. Thus, between bags of flour and a wooden bench that witnessed every detail, the war that was never real ended. It was all a mixture of sugar, salt, spark, and yeast. A small town that pretends it knows nothing, but spreads the story for everyone to hear. And Julie and Caleb proved, batch by batch, that when the oven gets hot, there is no sign that can hold it back. If you smiled at any moment, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which part you enjoyed the most. We will meet in the next fight. Oops! In the next story.